Hey, wonderful viewers. Welcome back to Pika Fiction. Buckle up for today's story. What if Ash won the Sinnoh League and Jupi and Mars of Team Galactic became his personal maid servants? Your likes and subscriptions help us continue creating content you love. Don't be shy, hit those buttons. Now, let's escape into the story. Chapter 1, The Weight of Victory. The stadium shook. Not from the battle, though Infernape's last flare blitz had carved a molten trench across the field, but from 60,000 voices screaming in unison, a wall of sound so dense it had weight. Ash Ketchum could feel it in his chest, vibrating through his ribs and down into the soles of his shoes where they gripped the trainer's platform. Across the devastated arena, Tobias's Darkrai lay motionless. Ash stared at the fallen legendary, his mind still 3 moves ahead, still calculating, still braced for the next threat. His body hadn't caught up to what his eyes were telling him. Darkrai was down. Tobias was reaching for his next Pokeball with an expression that said he'd never had to reach for it before. Darkrai is unable to battle, the referee's voice cracked through the stadium speakers. Trainer Tobias, select your next Pokemon. The roar doubled. Ash barely heard it. He recalled Infernape. The fire type was spent, breathing in ragged gasps, burns from his own ability creeping up his arms. He'd given everything. That was the only way to fight a Darkrai, give everything and hope it was enough. Pikachu pressed against Ash's leg, ears flat, sparking. Not from fear. From readiness. Tobias released his second Pokemon, and the sky went dark. Latios materialized in a blaze of blue and white, wings slicing the air with a sound like tearing silk. Another legendary. The crowd's roar shifted pitch, awe mixed with disbelief. 2 legendaries. Nobody used 2 legendaries. Ash's hand went to Pikachu's head, a reflex, a grounding touch. He felt the electric mouse tense under his palm. You ready? Pikachu's cheeks crackled. Pika. Then let's go. What happened next would be replayed on every sports network in every region for the next 6 months. Analysts would slow it down frame by frame, write dissertations on it, argue about it in bars and classrooms and Pokemon centers from Kanto to Kalos. Ash didn't use legendary power. He didn't use a gimmick or a trick or a never-before-seen move. He used Pikachu, Sceptile, and Staraptor in a rotation so fluid it looked choreographed, except choreography implied planning, and what Ash did was something rawer and rarer than planning. It was instinct refined by years of loss. Every defeat he'd ever swallowed, every tournament he'd walked away from empty-handed, every night he'd spent replaying his mistakes, all of it had been building toward this moment without him knowing it. Sceptile fell first, but not before landing a leaf blade that clipped Latios's wing and shattered its rhythm. Staraptor went next, a kamikaze brave bird that drove Latios into the ground hard enough to crack the reinforced battle surface. And then it was Pikachu, alone on the field against a legendary that was battered but far from finished. Latios came screaming in with Luster Purge, the air itself turning white-hot. Ash didn't call a dodge. He called Iron Tail, not at Latios, but at the ground. Pikachu slammed his glowing tail into the arena floor and launched himself straight up, over the Luster Purge that scorched the earth where he'd been standing, and brought a volt tackle down on the back of Latios's neck with every ounce of electricity in his body. The impact sounded like a thunderclap. Latios hit the ground. Didn't get up. And for one perfect, crystalline moment, the stadium went completely silent. Then the world exploded. Ash dropped to his knees on the trainer's platform, not from exhaustion but because his legs simply stopped working. Pikachu was already sprinting toward him, battered and sparking and alive and victorious, and Ash caught him and held him against his chest and felt the electric mouse's heartbeat hammering against his own. We did it, he said, and his voice cracked on the second word. Pikachu buried his face in Ash's jacket and cried, which was something Ash had never seen him do and would never tell anyone about. The scoreboard overhead updated with mechanical indifference, Ash Ketchum, winner, Sinnoh League Conference. He was 15 years old. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of handshakes, cameras, and conversations he couldn't remember 5 minutes after they ended. Ash smiled until his face hurt. He answered the same questions. How does it feel? Did you expect to beat Tobias? What's next? Until the words stopped meaning anything. Dawn cried when she hugged him. Brock didn't cry, but his hand shook when he gripped Ash's shoulder and said, I always knew you'd get here. His mom called from Pallet Town and cried harder than Dawn. Professor Oak called and talked for 45 minutes about the statistical improbability of a Pikachu defeating a Latios, which was his version of crying. Through it all, Ash kept waiting for the feeling to arrive, the triumph, the satisfaction, the sense of completion he'd been chasing since he was 10 years old and late to Professor Oak's lab. It flickered at the edges. He could feel it out there, circling. But it wouldn't land. Something else was sitting in its place. Something heavier. He figured out what it was on the third day, when Cynthia found him on the balcony of the League headquarters, staring at the mountains. You're not celebrating, she said. She leaned on the railing beside him, her long coat catching the wind. The Sinnoh champion, the real champion, the one who'd held the title for nearly a decade, regarded him with eyes that saw too much. I celebrated, Ash said. There was a party. I ate cake. You ate half a slice and spent 20 minutes talking to your Pokémon in the garden. They deserved the attention more than I did. Cynthia smiled. It was the kind of smile that said she'd been exactly where he was standing, years ago, and remembered what it felt like. The league title comes with more than a trophy, Ash. I know. Do you? He looked at her. She was watching him carefully, measuring something. There's a council session tomorrow morning, she said. I need you there. What for? The fate of Team Galactic's commanders. The mountain wind was cold. Ash pulled his jacket tighter but didn't look away from the peaks. Somewhere up there, on Spear Pillar, he'd watched Cyrus try to unmake reality. He'd watched Dialga and Palkia scream as their power was ripped from them. He'd watched a man choose oblivion over existence and nearly take the world with him. What about them? He asked. That's what we need to decide, Cynthia said. And your voice carries weight now, whether you wanted it to or not. That's part of what you won up on that battlefield, Ash. Not just a title. Responsibility. She left him on the balcony. The sun was going down behind him coronet, and the shadows were long. Pikachu climbed up to his shoulder and pressed his warm body against Ash's neck. Yeah, buddy, Ash murmured. I feel it too. The Sinnoh Regional Council chamber was built into the bedrock beneath the League headquarters, a vaulted stone room that felt older than the building above it, which it was. The walls were lined with carvings of Pokémon and trainers that dated back centuries. A horseshoe-shaped table dominated the floor, and seated around it were the 12 people who governed Pokémon training, law enforcement, and civil order across the Sinnoh region. Ash walked in wearing his cleanest jacket, which still had a scorch mark on the sleeve from Infernape's battle 3 days ago. Every head turned. Some of the council members looked at him with respect. Some with curiosity. At least 2 with something colder. Cynthia sat at the head of the table. She nodded to him, and he took the empty seat she'd reserved. This emergency session is convened to address the disposition of captured members of the criminal organization Team Galactic, Cynthia began. Specifically, the sentencing of Commanders Mars, Jupiter, and 18 lower-ranking operatives currently held in League custody. A man at the far end of the table cleared his throat. He was tall, silver-haired, built like someone who'd spent decades in military service before transitioning to politics. His nameplate read Councilman Halvard. With respect, Champion Cynthia, I don't see why this requires a special session. The commanders participated in attempted acts of mass destruction. The charges carry life imprisonment under Sinnoh Regional Code. Sentence them and be done with it. Because it's not that simple, Halvard, said a woman across the table, younger, sharp-featured, with the pin of the Pokemon Ranger Corps on her lapel. Councilwoman Yara. The Galactic commanders were operating under extreme psychological manipulation by Cyrus. Several psychiatric evaluations suggest diminished capacity. Halvard's voice cut like a blade. They helped operate a machine that nearly tore apart spacetime. They attacked civilians, stole Pokemon, and assaulted League officials. The red-haired one, Mars, personally led the assault on the Valley Windworks. Jupiter orchestrated the bombing of the Celestic Town Research Station. These aren't lost souls. They're war criminals. Ash listened. He'd never been good at sitting still, and the political back and forth made his skin itch, but he forced himself to absorb it. Around the table, opinions split roughly down the middle. The hardliners wanted maximum sentences. The moderates wanted to explore alternatives. And in the middle, Cynthia steered the conversation with the patience of someone who'd been navigating this kind of current her entire career. There is a third option, Cynthia said, when the argument had circled long enough. The rehabilitation through service program. The chamber went quiet. This framework was used in Unova following the disbandment of Team Plasma, she continued. Convicted operatives are assigned to supervised custody under trainers or officials who were directly involved in their defeat. The convicts serve a mandatory period of rehabilitation, menial duties, restricted movement, monitored behavior, while receiving psychological counseling and gradual reintegration into civilian life. You want to turn terrorists into servants? Halvard said. I want to give people a chance to prove they can be something other than what they were, Cynthia replied. And if they prove they can't? If they escape? If they kill their assigned custodian in their sleep? The monitoring anklets are rated to withstand hyperbeam. They track location, vital signs, and proximity to restricted zones. Any attempt to tamper triggers an immediate response from League enforcement. And the custodians are not chosen randomly, they're selected from the trainers with the highest combat capability and the strongest track record against Galactic specifically. Halvard leaned back in his chair. His eyes swept the table and landed on Ash with the weight of a Snorlax. And I suppose our newly crowned League champion is volunteering? Every gaze in the room swiveled to Ash. He hadn't planned on speaking this early. He hadn't planned on speaking at all, really. He'd come because Cynthia asked, and because he felt like he should know what happened to the people he'd fought. But Halvard was looking at him the way people looked at things they didn't consider threats, and something hot and stubborn flared in Ash's chest. I think everyone deserves a chance, he said. His voice was steady. It surprised him. That's a child's philosophy, Halvard said. Maybe. But I've beaten every trainer and every threat that Sinnoh has put in front of me, and I did it by believing in second chances. My Infernape was abandoned by his first trainer. My Charizard ignored me for months. People told me to give up on them. I didn't. And they're the reason I'm sitting in this chair. Silence. Yara was trying not to smile. Two other council members exchanged glances. Pokemon aren't people, Halvard said. Pokemon don't choose cruelty. Neither did the Galactic commanders, Ash said. They chose Cyrus. He chose the cruelty for them. Halvard opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Ash for a long moment, reassessing, recalculating, and then turned to Cynthia. The boy's idealism is touching. It's also going to get someone killed. Noted, Cynthia said, in a tone that meant it wasn't noted at all. Shall we vote? The vote was 7-5. The rehabilitation through service program passed. Halvard's jaw could have cut glass. After the session ended and the council members filed out, Cynthia caught Ash by the door. That was well said, she told him. Was it enough? It tipped 2 votes. That was the margin. She studied him. You know what this means, don't you? You spoke up. Halvard will remember that. And the council will assign the most high-profile cases to you as a result. Mars and Jupiter, they'll be yours. Ash felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not regret. Not fear. Something closer to the feeling he got right before a difficult battle, the awareness that he'd committed to a path and there was no going back. I can handle it, he said. I know you can, Cynthia said. That's why I brought you here. She walked away, and Ash realized she'd planned this from the beginning. He wasn't sure if he should be impressed or annoyed. He settled on both. The champion's estate in Hearthome City was absurd. Ash stood in the entrance hall, a hall, not a room, a hall with vaulted ceilings and marble floors and a chandelier that probably cost more than his house in Pallet Town, and tried to reconcile the fact that this was where he lived now. His footsteps echoed. Pikachu's claws clicked on the stone. The estate came with the league title. A sprawling manor on the northern edge of the city, backed up against the foothills, surrounded by grounds large enough to house all his Pokémon comfortably. The previous occupant had been a champion from 30 years ago who'd used it for exactly 4 months before retiring to a cottage in Celestic Town. Nobody had lived here since. It's too big, Ash said to Pikachu. Pika. Pikachu's ears drooped. He agreed. Ash explored the house because there was nothing else to do. 6 bedrooms. A library he'd never read. A kitchen designed for a staff he didn't have. A training arena in the back that was actually perfect, regulation-sized, with adjustable terrain and a pool for water types. He let his team out in the grounds. Infernape claimed a rocky outcrop near the tree line. Staraptor took to the sky and didn't come back for an hour. Bizel found the pool. Torterra settled into the garden like a small hill and went to sleep. Glisker hung from a beam in the training arena and watched everyone with bright, curious eyes. Pikachu stayed with Ash. He always did. Home sweet home, buddy. It didn't feel like home. But Ash had learned a long time ago that home wasn't a building. Home was the people in it. In 2 days, he was going to have people in it. Whether that would make it feel like home or a war zone remained to be seen. They arrived on a Tuesday. Ash had spent the previous day trying to make the house less intimidating, which mostly involved pushing furniture around and putting out fresh berries in bowls, like he was preparing for guests instead of receiving convicted criminals. Pikachu watched him with an expression of patient judgment. The League transport pulled up at 9 in the morning, a reinforced vehicle with dark windows and the Sinnoh League crest on the doors. 2 officers in tactical gear stepped out first, scanning the perimeter out of habit. Then the rear doors opened. Mars came out fighting. Not physically, the restraints prevented that, but every line of her body radiated resistance. She walked like someone being led to execution and daring the executioner to make eye contact. Her red hair caught the morning sun, vivid as a wound. Her eyes, sharp, furious, cornered, swept the estate with open contempt. She was shorter than Ash expected. Somehow, in his memory of their encounters during the Galactic crisis, she'd been larger. Taller. More monstrous. In the morning light, in civilian clothes instead of her commander's uniform, she looked like what she was, a young woman, probably no more than 20, who had been on the wrong side of a war and lost. That didn't make her less dangerous. The set of her jaw said she knew exactly how dangerous she still was, restraints or not. Jupiter followed. Where Mars burned, Jupiter was still. She stepped out of the transport like she was arriving at a business meeting, composed, unhurried, her expression a polished mask of absolute nothing. Her purple hair was pulled back. Her eyes registered Ash, the estate, the officers, the morning light, all with the same cool assessment. Filing. Cataloging. Calculating. She was the one who scared him more, though he'd never admit it. The head officer, a stocky woman named Reeves, handed Ash a tablet with their monitoring specs. Ankle units are active. Tracking is live. You'll get alerts on this device if they move beyond the designated perimeter, attempt to tamper with the units, or if their vitals spike in a pattern consistent with aggressive action. Vitals spike. Heart rate, adrenaline, galvanic skin response. If they gear up to attack someone, you'll know before they throw the first punch. Mars snorted. It was the first sound she'd made, and it carried enough disdain to fill the entire courtyard. You think I need to gear up to hurt this kid, she said. Mars, Jupiter said quietly. Just the name. Nothing else. But Mars shut her mouth, and Ash filed that dynamic away for later. Officer Reeves ignored the exchange. Their Pokémon are being held at League HQ. They can petition for supervised access after 90 days of compliant behavior. They have no access to communication devices, no unsupervised internet access, and no right to leave the property without your explicit authorization. She looked at Ash with the practiced neutrality of someone who had opinions she was paid not to express. You're sure about this, champion? Yeah, Ash said. I'm sure. Reeves nodded. She signaled her team, and the transport pulled away, and Ash was standing in his courtyard with two former Galactic commanders and a Pikachu who was eyeing them both with his cheeks sparking. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. So, Mars said, looking at the estate with exaggerated disdain. This is the palace of the great Pokémon Master. Congratulations. It's ugly. It's not that bad, Ash said. It looks like a Bastiodon tried to mate with a library. Despite himself, Ash laughed. Mars blinked, she hadn't expected that reaction. Jupiter said nothing. She was looking at the monitoring anklet on her left leg with an expression of clinical interest, as if it were a puzzle to be solved rather than a chain to be endured. Come on, Ash said. I'll show you around. He led them inside. Showed them the kitchen, the common areas, the training arena out back. Showed them their rooms, adjacent to each other on the second floor, furnished simply but comfortably, with windows that overlooked the grounds. These are the servants' quarters? Jupiter asked. Her tone was perfectly flat. They're guest rooms, Ash said. I don't have servants' quarters. We're not guests. You're not servants either. Jupiter's mask flickered. Something moved behind her eyes, surprise, quickly buried. Mars crossed her arms and stared at the room like it had personally offended her. There's a list of duties the council sent over, Ash continued. Cleaning, cooking, grounds maintenance. Basic household stuff. I'm supposed to have you do it as part of the program. How thrilling, Mars said. And if we refuse? Then the house stays messy and I eat cereal for dinner. Same as usual. Mars stared at him. Jupiter stared at him. Pikachu yawned. Look, Ash said, and he met their eyes directly, first Mars, then Jupiter. I didn't ask for this arrangement any more than you did. I know you don't want to be here. I know you think this is humiliating. And I know you're both looking for the angle, the way I'm going to use this to punish you or control you or whatever you think I'm planning. He paused. Ran a hand through his hair. He was 15 and standing in front of two women who'd commanded armies and nearly ended the world, and he was supposed to be their warden, and the absurdity of it wasn't lost on him. I don't have an angle, he said. I just want to help. If you'll let me. And if not, if you want to spend the whole time hating me and counting down the days, that's okay too. But I'm not going to make you call me master or bow or any of that crap. My name's Ash. Use it. He walked out. Left them standing in the hallway. Behind him, he heard Mars mutter, "What the hell is wrong with him?" And Jupiter, so quietly he almost missed it, "I don't know." The first week was war. Not open conflict, nothing so clean. It was a war of attrition, fought in small gestures and loaded silences and carefully placed provocations. Mars tested every boundary. She cooked meals that were deliberately terrible, oversalted, underseasoned, occasionally featuring ingredients that were technically edible but clearly chosen for maximum unpleasantness. She cleaned rooms in a way that left them technically clean but subtly wrong. Chairs rotated 15 degrees, books reshuffled out of order, Ash's toothbrush in a different spot every morning. She wanted a reaction. She wanted anger, orders, punishment, anything she could push back against. That was the terrain she understood. Conflict was comfortable. Authority was familiar. She'd spent years under Cyrus's command, and before that, from what Ash could piece together from her file, she'd spent years under other authorities who were even less kind. Ash didn't give her the fight she wanted. He ate the terrible food and said, "Thanks." He noticed the moved furniture and moved it back without comment. When she called him names, kid, brat, champion idiot, he responded to them like they were his actual name. It drove her insane. Jupiter's resistance was more sophisticated. She performed every assigned task with mechanical perfection, each movement communicating the same message: I am doing this because I have to. Not a single atom of effort beyond what is required. You have my compliance. You will never have anything more. She called him Champion Ketchum with a politeness so sharp it drew blood. She answered his questions with the minimum possible words. She stood when he entered a room, not out of respect, but as a pointed reminder of the power dynamic, a silent declaration that she knew exactly what she was and would not pretend otherwise. Once, he caught her reading a book from the library, a dense text on dimensional theory that he couldn't have understood with a dictionary and a week's head start. She closed it immediately when she saw him, as if being caught with an interest was a vulnerability she couldn't afford. You can read whatever you want, he told her. Thank you, Champion Ketchum. The words were a locked door. Ash. Champion Ketchum. He let it go. For now. Pikachu, for his part, maintained a careful perimeter. He didn't threaten, but he didn't welcome. When Mars walked through a room, his ears tracked her. When Jupiter was nearby, his cheeks sparked just enough to be noticed. He slept at the foot of Ash's bed, which he hadn't done since Ash was 12. Give them time, Ash told him one night. Pikachu's expression said, I'll give them time when they earn it. The crack appeared on day 9. Ash couldn't sleep. It happened more often than he'd admit. His brain liked to wait until the house was dark and quiet before replaying every decision he'd made that day, that week, that year. Tonight it was churning through the council session, Halvard's cold eyes, the weight of the vote, the look on Mars's face when she'd first seen the estate. He went downstairs to the kitchen. Midnight kitchens were his refuge. There was something grounding about the hum of the refrigerator, the familiar routine of heating water for tea, the simple physics of a kettle on a stove. Mars was already there. She was sitting at the kitchen table in the dark, wearing an oversized shirt that wasn't hers. She'd stolen it from the laundry, one of Ash's old tournament shirts, and staring at nothing. Her red hair was down, messy from sleep or lack of it. Without the sharp posture and sharper tongue, she looked smaller. Younger. Tired in a way that went deeper than one night's insomnia. She flinched when the light came on. Then her walls snapped up so fast Ash could almost hear them slam. What do you want? She said. Tea, Ash said. He made 2 cups without asking. Set one in front of her. Sat down across the table. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, something hooted in the trees, Staraptor, probably, running nocturnal patrols out of habit. Mars didn't touch the tea. She stared at it like it might be poisoned. I wasn't doing anything, she said. In case you were going to report my midnight activities to your council friends. I wasn't. Because I know how this works. Any excuse to extend the sentence, to add restrictions, to Mars. I'm just having tea. She stopped talking. Her hands were wrapped around the cup now despite herself, absorbing the warmth. Ash noticed her knuckles were red and cracked. From cleaning, he realized. She'd been scrubbing the training arena floor by hand yesterday, even though he'd told her the automated system could handle it. She'd done it as a show of contempt, look at the great Commander Mars on her knees scrubbing floors, but she'd actually done it thoroughly, and her hands had paid the price. He got up, found the first aid kit, and set a tube of healing salve on the table in front of her. Mars looked at the salve. Looked at him. Her expression cracked, just for a second, a hairline fracture in the armor, and underneath it was something raw and confused. "Why are you like this?" she whispered. "Like what?" "Kind. You should hate me. I tried to destroy the world. I attacked your friends. I hurt Pokemon. I did terrible things, and you're sitting here at 2 in the morning giving me hand cream and making me tea like I'm. She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't know what she was, Ash realized. That was the core of it. Cyrus had given her an identity, Commander Mars, loyal soldier, instrument of the new world, and without him she was just a woman sitting in a dark kitchen with cracked knuckles and nowhere to go. "You did terrible things," Ash agreed. "But you're not a terrible person." "How would you know?" "Because a terrible person wouldn't be sitting here at 2 in the morning feeling guilty about them." Mars's eyes went wide. Then wet. She looked away fast, jaw clenching, and Ash saw the muscles in her throat work as she swallowed whatever was trying to come up. He didn't push. He sipped his tea. Let the silence hold. After a long moment, Mars reached for the salve. She uncapped it and worked it into her hands with rough, efficient movements, not meeting his eyes. "Ash," she said. It was the first time she'd used his name. "Yeah. The tea is acceptable." He smiled into his cup. Days turned into weeks. The war of attrition didn't end, but it changed character, less hostile, more habitual. Mars still cooked terrible food, but now it was terrible in the direction of trying and failing rather than failing on purpose. Jupiter still performed her duties with robotic precision, but she'd stopped closing her book when Ash walked in. Small things. Glacial shifts. Ash trained every day. His Pokemon needed work. The League victory had been a peak, but peaks were starting points, not endpoints. He ran drills in the arena, worked on combination attacks, pushed his team's limits and his own. Mars watched from the sidelines sometimes. She tried to pretend she wasn't, occupying herself with cleaning tasks that happened to be in the vicinity of the training arena, but Ash caught her tracking Infernape's movements with the analytical eye of someone who understood combat at a deep level. Jupiter watched too, but she didn't pretend. She sat in the stands with her book open on her lap, eyes on the battle, making occasional notes in the margins that Ash would later discover were tactical assessments of his team's weaknesses. When he found them, he wasn't angry. He was impressed. Her analysis was sharp, sharper than most professional scouts. She'd identified 3 defensive gaps in his rotation that he hadn't noticed. He left the book on her nightstand with a sticky note, "Thanks for the notes." Fixed gap 2, still working on 1 and 3. Ash, the next morning, the book reappeared on his desk. New notes in the margin. Corrections to his corrections. A small, neat diagram of an alternative formation that addressed all 3 gaps simultaneously. No signature. No acknowledgement. But it was the first time Jupiter had given him something she hadn't been required to give. Cynthia called on a Thursday evening. Ash took it in his study, a room he'd converted from imposing office to comfortable mess, by covering the desk with training notes and stacking Pokeball maintenance equipment on the bookshelves. "How are they settling in?" Cynthia asked. Her image on the video screen was slightly pixelated. She was calling from somewhere with poor signal. "Mars tried to set the kitchen on fire yesterday. I think it was an accident. 70% sure." Cynthia almost smiled. "And Jupiter?" "She reorganized my entire library by subject while I was training. Didn't ask. Didn't tell me. I just walked in and everything was alphabetized." "That sounds like her. Control where she can find it." "Yeah." Ash leaned back. "Cynthia, why are you really calling?" The almost smile faded. "We've been getting reports from the Mth coordinate research stations. Energy readings that don't match anything in our databases. Fluctuations in dimensional stability, small ones, but they're increasing. From spear pillar. From near spear pillar. The epicenter keeps shifting, like something moving beneath the surface. Pokemon in the deep caves are migrating toward the exits. Rangers are reporting zones where electronic equipment malfunctions without explanation. Ash felt the hair on his arms stand up. Pikachu, dozing on the desk, raised his head. Is it leftovers from what Cyrus did? That's the working theory. The dimensional event at Spear Pillar was unprecedented. We don't know what kind of residual effects it might have. She paused. But Ash, there's something else. 4 days ago, a research facility on the outskirts of Veilstone City was broken into. Equipment stolen, specifically, instruments designed to measure and contain dimensional energy. The security footage showed operatives in galactic uniforms. Galactic? But we captured the commanders and the majority of the grunts. We did not capture Sharon. The name landed like a stone in water. Sharon. Galactic's chief scientist. The old man with the cruel smile and the mind like a razor. During the Spear Pillar crisis, he'd been everywhere and nowhere, always in the background, always essential, and when the hammer finally came down, he'd vanished like smoke. You think Sharon is gathering the remnants, Ash said. I think Sharon is a man who saw a door to godhood open and is very unhappy that it was closed before he could walk through it. And I think he spent the last month preparing to open it again. Ash stared at the screen. The weight he'd felt since the League victory, the heaviness that sat where triumph should have been, suddenly made sense. It wasn't the absence of satisfaction. It was the presence of something unfinished. What do you need from me? He asked. For now, nothing. Stay alert. Keep training. And Ash, she hesitated. Mars and Jupiter were Karen's colleagues. They may know things about his methods, his capabilities, his contingency plans. Things that aren't in any file. You want me to interrogate them? I want you to talk to them. You're better at getting people to open up than any intelligence officer I've got. She signed off. Ash sat in the study for a long time, thinking. Pikachu watched him with bright, dark eyes. It's not over, is it, buddy? Pika Pie. No. It wasn't. He didn't interrogate them. He didn't even bring it up directly. Instead, the next evening, he did something he hadn't done before, he invited them to eat with him. Not as a command. He cooked, badly, but sincerely, and set 3 places at the kitchen table and said, "Dinner's ready if you want some." Mars came because the food smelled better than her own cooking, which she would never admit. Jupiter came because Mars came, and Jupiter went where Mars went, a pattern Ash had noticed early on. They were bonded in a way that went beyond shared employment, they'd been in the trenches together, and whatever else had changed, that hadn't. The meal was quiet at first. Ash had made rice and curry, the one dish he could reliably produce without setting anything on fire. It wasn't good, but it was warm, and that counted for something. This is terrible, Mars said, eating her second helping. I know. Mine is worse. I know that too. Mars kicked him under the table. It wasn't gentle, but it wasn't hostile either. It existed in a new space between them, something that might, under certain light, look like the beginning of camaraderie. Jupiter ate slowly and precisely, as if the act of sharing a meal was a negotiation she was managing bite by bite. I need to tell you both something, Ash said. They looked at him. Mars's guard snapped up. Jupiter's went higher, it had never been down. There was a break-in at a research facility in Veilstone. Galactic operatives. They stole equipment related to dimensional energy research. He watched their faces carefully. Sharon is still out there. Mars's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Something complex moved across her face, anger, fear, recognition. She set the fork down. Of course he is, she said. That old snake. He was always 3 steps ahead of everyone, including Cyrus. What do you know about him? About what he might be planning? Mars shook her head. Sharon didn't share plans. Not with us. We were soldiers. He was, she searched for the word. He was something else. Cyrus had the vision. Saturn had the faith. Mars and Jupiter had the muscle. Sharon had the knowledge. And he hoarded it like a dragon hoards gold. Ash looked at Jupiter. She hadn't spoken. She was studying the table with an intensity that suggested she was seeing something far more complicated than wooden grain. Jupiter. He was building fail-safes, she said quietly. I suspected, but I could never prove it. Secondary systems. Redundant power sources. Data caches and locations that weren't on any official galactic map. She looked up, and for the first time, her mask was thin enough that Ash could see through it. What he saw was not cold. It was carefully controlled fear. Sharon never believed in Cyrus's new world. He believed in power. And he was always planning for the scenario where Cyrus failed and he could pick up the pieces. Do you know where these failsafes are? No. But I know how he thinks. His methodology. His patterns. She paused. If you need my analysis, I can provide it. It wasn't an offer of help. It was a statement of capability, delivered with the precision of a chess move. Jupiter was showing him what she was worth, not as a servant, not as a prisoner, but as an asset. Ash met her eyes. I'd appreciate that. Something shifted in Jupiter's expression. Not warmth, not yet. But the absence of cold. A degree or two of thaw. Mars was watching both of them with an expression Ash couldn't read. She picked up her fork and stabbed at her curry. Sharon is dangerous, she said. More dangerous than Cyrus in some ways. Cyrus wanted to destroy the world because he hated it. Sharon wants to control it because he thinks he deserves it. A nihilist will burn everything down. A narcissist will burn everything down and charge admission. Then we need to be ready, Ash said. All 3 of us. Mars looked at him. At Jupiter. Back at him. All 3 of us, she repeated, like she was testing the weight of the words. Then, slowly, she nodded. The call from Halvard came 2 days later. Ash was in the training arena, running Pikachu through a speed drill that involved dodging water balloons launched by a cackling Bizel, when his communicator chimed with a priority alert. He stepped off the field, toweled sweat off his face, and answered. Halvard's face filled the screen. He did not look happy, which, from what Ash could tell, was his default state. Champion Ketchum. Councilman Halvard. I'll be direct. I've introduced a motion before the Council to transfer the Galactic commanders from residential rehabilitation to military secure holding. Ash's hand tightened on the towel. On what grounds? On the grounds that a 15-year-old boy, however talented he may be at Pokemon battles, is not equipped to supervise high-risk criminal assets. On the grounds that the rehabilitation program was passed by the narrowest possible margin and remains deeply unpopular with the public. And on the grounds that the recent attack in Veilstone demonstrates that Galactic is still an active threat, and having their former commanders sitting comfortably in a mansion is, at best, poor optics. At worst, a security risk. Mars and Jupiter had nothing to do with the Veilstone attack. Can you prove that? Can you prove they did? Halvard's eyes narrowed. The motion will be voted on in 1 week. I suggest you prepare your arguments, champion. Because if you can't convince the council that this program is working, those 2 will be in a secure facility by month's end. And I can assure you, it won't have fresh berries and guest rooms. The call ended. Ash stood in the arena, the communicator dead in his hand, and felt the ground shifting under his feet. He found Mars in the garden. She was pulling weeds, one of her assigned duties, and one she'd approached with the same intensity she apparently brought to everything. Half the garden bed was immaculate. The other half looked like it had been attacked. "We need to talk," he said. She looked up. Read his face. Set down the gardening tool and stood in one smooth motion, red hair falling across her eyes. What happened? He told her about Halvard's motion. Watched her face cycle through anger, fear, and something harder to name. "A military facility," she said. "He means a black site." I know what secure holding means, Ash. I ran intelligence operations for 3 years. Secure holding is a concrete room with no windows and guards who don't have names. It's where people go when the government wants to forget they exist. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. She shoved them into her pockets. "I won't let that happen," Ash said. "You might not have a choice." "I always have a choice." Mars stared at him. The wind picked up, pulling at her hair and his jacket, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "Why?" she asked. The word was raw. "Why do you care? You could let them take us. It'd be easier. No more political headaches, no more babysitting former terrorists, no more, because you're not former terrorists," Ash said. "You're Mars and Jupiter. And someone needs to fight for you because nobody ever has." Mars's mouth opened. Closed. Her eyes were bright, and she turned away sharply, but not before Ash saw the tear track on her cheek. "Damn you," she whispered. "Damn you and your stupid kindness." She walked away. Ash let her go. From the second-floor window, Jupiter watched. She'd heard every word. Her hand rested on the glass, and she didn't realize she'd placed it there. Ash spent the next 4 days building his case. He requested records, compiled behavioral reports, and drafted a statement for the council with the meticulous determination he usually reserved for developing battle strategies. Dawn came up from Twin Leaf Town to help. She was better with words than he was, and she organized his argument into something coherent while gently pointing out that, because they're people and people deserve chances, wasn't going to sway politicians. "You need evidence of progress," Dawn said, spreading papers across the study desk. "Behavioral metrics. Compliance records. Anything concrete." "They've been compliant. Reluctantly compliant. There's a difference. Halvard will argue they're just biding their time. They're not." Dawn looked at him. She'd been his friend long enough to hear what he wasn't saying. "Ash. You're not getting attached to them, are you? They're people, Dawn. Living in my house. Eating meals with me. Yeah, I'm getting attached. That's kind of the point. The point is rehabilitation. Not what?" Dawn bit her lip. She glanced toward the hallway, where Mars's voice could be faintly heard arguing with the vacuum cleaner. "Just be careful," she said. "Please." Brock arrived the next day, ostensibly to visit but actually because Dawn had called him. He took one look at the situation and, in his Brock way, saw everything. "You're in over your head," he told Ash, not unkindly. "I know. And you're going to do it anyway." "Yep." Brock sighed. Then he rolled up his sleeves and cooked a dinner that made Mars visibly emotional, though she'd later claimed the tears were from the spice. During dinner, all 5 of them around the kitchen table, the most people the house had held since Ash moved in, Brock did something remarkable. He talked to Mars and Jupiter like they were normal people. Not criminals. Not projects. Not problems. He asked Mars about her favorite Pokemon type, fire, obviously, and Jupiter about the book she was reading, Historical Analysis of the Sinnoh Trade Wars, which Brock found genuinely interesting. He made them laugh, Mars with a terrible joke, Jupiter with a dry observation about the absurdity of their situation that surprised a smile out of her before she could stop it. After dinner, Mars volunteered to wash dishes. Not because it was her duty. Because Brock had cooked. Jupiter dried. Ash caught Brock's eye across the kitchen. Brock gave him a small nod that said, "I see it. You're doing something right." The night before the council vote, Ash was woken by a sound. Not a loud sound. A quiet one, the soft click of a door opening on the first floor, followed by the whisper of footsteps that knew how to be silent. He was out of bed in seconds, Pikachu on his shoulder, moving through the darkened house with the silent efficiency of someone who'd spent years navigating unfamiliar terrain. The monitoring system on his tablet showed both Mars's and Jupiter's anklets in their rooms. So whoever was downstairs wasn't them. The first floor study. The window was open, neatly, professionally, no broken glass. A figure stood at the desk, going through Ash's files with quick, practiced hands. Not a burglar. The movements were too skilled, too purposeful. This person was looking for something specific. Ash hit the light. The figure spun. Male, early 20s, lean and fast, dressed in dark clothes with no identifying marks. His hand went to his belt, 2 pokeballs. "I wouldn't," Ash said. Pikachu's cheeks lit up like twin suns. The air crackled with ozone. The intruder assessed the situation in about half a second. He was good, Ash could see the calculation behind his eyes, the trained operative weighing options. 2 pokeballs against a Pikachu that had just dropped a Latios. He chose discretion. His hand moved away from the pokeballs. He raised both palms, but his body stayed coiled, ready. "Who sent you?" Ash asked. "I'm not at liberty," Mars's voice came from the doorway behind Ash, cold as a blade's edge. "He's one of Halvard's." Ash turned. Mars stood in the hallway, barefoot, wearing the stolen tournament shirt, her hair wild. But her eyes were focused and sharp, Commander Mars's eyes, not the woman who'd cried in the kitchen. "How do you know?" Ash asked. Third button on his collar. It's a League Intelligence Division pin, turned inside out. Standard practice for deniable operatives. I've seen 100 of them. She stepped forward, and the intruder actually stepped back. "He's here to find your case files. The ones you've been preparing for the council vote. Halvard wants to know your arguments before the session so he can counter them." The intruder's face confirmed it. Subtle, a flicker of the eyes, a tightening of the jaw, but enough. Jupiter appeared at the top of the stairs, silent as a ghost. She'd been awake too, Ash realized. Maybe she never slept. The window entry was northeast corner, second panel. That's the same point identified in the estate security assessment as the weakest ingress. The assessment was filed with the League's Facilities Division. Halvard would have access to it through his committee assignments. Mars and Jupiter. Former intelligence commanders. Their skills hadn't atrophied with a few weeks of gardening and cooking. Ash looked at the intruder. Then at the files on his desk, his carefully prepared arguments, his evidence of progress, his defense of 2 women who were standing behind him right now and hadn't been asked to help and were helping anyway. "Get out," Ash told the intruder. "And tell Halvard that if he wants to know my arguments, he can hear them tomorrow like everyone else." The man went through the window. Ash closed it behind him. The 3 of them stood in the study in the quiet that followed. Pikachu's cheeks dimmed slowly, casting the room in fading amber light. "Thank you," Ash said. "Both of you." Mars shrugged with exaggerated casualness that fooled nobody. "I wasn't going to let that rat go through your underwear drawer." The files were on the desk, not in my, same principle. Jupiter was looking at Ash with an expression he'd never seen on her face before. It wasn't warm, Jupiter didn't do warm, but it was open. The mask was down, and what was behind it was a woman who had just done something she hadn't been ordered to do, hadn't been obligated to do, had done purely because she cared. About the outcome. About the files. About him. She seemed to realize what her face was showing and looked away. "You should encrypt those files, Champion Ketchum." I can set up a basic encryption protocol if you like. Ash, he said. Champion, Ash. The silence stretched. Jupiter's jaw worked. Her hands, usually so still, fidgeted at her sides. Ash, she said. It came out quiet. Almost fragile. Like she was testing a bridge she wasn't sure would hold her weight. He smiled at her. Not a big smile, just a small one, just enough. She didn't smile back, but something in her posture eased, a tension releasing that had been there since the day she'd arrived. Mars watched this exchange with an expression that was complicated in ways she wasn't ready to examine. She crossed her arms and looked at the ceiling. Great. We're all friends now. Can I go back to sleep? Yeah, Ash said. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Mars left. Jupiter lingered for a moment, her hand on the doorframe. Ash. Yeah. Don't let them take us. She was gone before he could respond. Her footsteps on the stairs were silent, but the words she'd left behind were the loudest thing in the house. Ash sat down at his desk. Pikachu curled up on the blotter. And Ash worked through the night, building his case one piece at a time, with the focus and determination that had carried him through 6 regions and 100 battles and 1 impossible league victory. He was not going to lose this one. The council chamber felt different the second time. Smaller, somehow. More charged. Halvard sat at his usual seat, flanked by allies, his expression the serene confidence of a man who'd already written his victory speech. Ash stood at the speaker's podium. He hadn't slept. He didn't feel tired. Councilman Halvard has moved to transfer the Galactic commanders from the Rehabilitation Through Service program to Military Secure Holding, Cynthia said. Champion Ketchum has the floor to respond. Ash looked around the table. 12 faces. 7 votes to keep the program. 5 to end it. Same margin as last time, and last time Halvard hadn't been playing offense. I'm not going to argue law, Ash said. I'm not a lawyer. And I'm not going to argue policy, because I'm not a politician. Halvard's eyebrow twitched. He hadn't expected that opening. I'm going to tell you what I've seen. He told them about Mars's cracked knuckles. About Jupiter reorganizing the library. About terrible food getting slowly less terrible. About a midnight conversation in a dark kitchen where a woman who'd nearly ended the world asked him why he was being kind, and couldn't understand the answer. He told them about the intruder. The chamber went very still. Last night, an operative broke into my residence and attempted to access my case files for this hearing. Mars identified him as a League Intelligence Division agent. Jupiter identified the security vulnerability he exploited, a vulnerability documented in League files that Councilman Halvard would have access to. Halvard's face didn't change, but his allies shifted uncomfortably. 2 former Galactic commanders caught an intruder in my home. They didn't attack him. They didn't flee. They didn't use the disruption as cover for an escape attempt. They identified the threat, provided intelligence, and stood by me. He paused. That's not the behavior of people biding their time. That's the behavior of people who are choosing, to be something different. Yara was nodding. 2 of the swing voters were leaning forward. You can lock them in a black site, Ash said. You can bury them in concrete and pretend the problem is solved. But the problem isn't Mars and Jupiter. The problem is Sharon, who's still free, still building, still planning to finish what Cyrus started. And the 2 people in this region who understand his methods best, who can help us stop him, you want to lock them in a hole because it's more convenient than doing the hard thing. He looked directly at Halvard. The hard thing is trust. The hard thing is giving people a chance and accepting the risk that comes with it. I know it's a risk. I accept it. And I'm asking this council to accept it with me. Silence. Cynthia called the vote. 9-3. The motion failed. The program continued. Halvard left the chamber without speaking to anyone. His footsteps echoed in the stone corridor like a door slamming. Outside, in the sunlight, Cynthia put her hand on Ash's shoulder. "You just made a very powerful enemy," she said. "I know. You also just saved 2 lives." Ash thought about Jupiter's voice in the darkness, "Don't let them take us," and felt something settle in his chest. Not the weight of victory. Something lighter. Something that felt, for the first time, like it was exactly where it belonged. "Yeah," he said. "I know that too." He got home as the sun was setting. The estate looked different in the evening light, warmer, somehow. Less absurd. The windows glowed from within, and he could smell something cooking. Inside, he found Mars in the kitchen, wrestling with what appeared to be a stew. It smelled, actually decent. She was following a recipe, he realized. She'd never used a recipe before. "How did it go?" she asked, not looking up from the pot. 9-3. "We won." Mars's stirring hand stopped. She stood very still for a moment. Then she resumed stirring, a little faster than before. "Good," she said. Her voice was thick. "I would have hated that black site. The lighting in those places is terrible." Jupiter was in the living room, reading. She looked up when Ash entered, and he saw her eyes search his face for the answer before he could give it. "We're staying," he said. Jupiter's book lowered an inch. Her expression didn't change, but her grip on the pages relaxed, and she breathed out, long and slow, like she'd been holding it since he'd left. "That is, satisfactory," she said. Ash laughed. He couldn't help it. Satisfactory. Yeah. The 3 of them ate dinner together. Mars's stew was passable, a massive improvement that she downplayed and Ash celebrated. Jupiter ate quietly, but she had seconds. Pikachu sat on the table and stole vegetables from Mars's bowl, and Mars pretended to be outraged but kept pushing the good pieces toward him. After dinner, Ash's communicator buzzed. A priority message from Cynthia. He read it at the table, and the warmth drained from his face. "What is it?" Mars asked. She'd learned to read him faster than he was comfortable with. "Cynthia. The energy readings from Coronet have intensified. 3 new anomaly zones in the last 48 hours. Rangers are reporting areas where Pokeballs stop working entirely. Pokemon moves fizzle out. Electronics die." He looked up. "And there's been another attack. A research station in Orberg. Same pattern as Veilstone. Galactic operatives. More equipment stolen." The kitchen was quiet. The stew cooled on the table. "Sharon," Jupiter said. "He's accelerating," Mars said. "Whatever timeline he's on, he's moved it up." Ash looked at both of them. 2 women who'd been his reluctant houseguests for a month. 2 women who'd helped save his case files from political sabotage. 2 women who'd chosen to stay. "I'm going to need your help," he said. "Both of you." Mars met his eyes. The defiance was still there, it would always be there, it was woven into her DNA, but now it was pointed outward, at the threat, instead of inward, at him. Jupiter closed her book. Set it aside with the careful precision of someone clearing a desk for important work. "Then you'll have it," Jupiter said. Mars grinned. It was sharp and dangerous and, for the first time, not directed at Ash. "About damn time," she said. Outside, the mountain wind picked up, carrying with it something that might have been a sound or might have been a silence, a frequency too low for human ears, too vast for human understanding. Deep beneath Coronet, in the scars that Cyrus had carved into the skin of reality, something shifted. Something that was not quite darkness and not quite emptiness but something older and stranger than either. The cracks were widening. And somewhere in a hidden laboratory lit by light that cast no shadows, Sharon smiled at his instruments and whispered, "Almost. Almost ready." The first chapter of Ash Ketchum's story had ended on a battlefield with 60,000 people screaming his name. The next chapter was beginning in a quiet kitchen with 2 women and a Pikachu and a bowl of mediocre stew. He had a feeling this chapter would be harder. He was right. Chapter 2, Cracks in the Armor. The transport to Veilstone took 3 hours by air. Ash spent the first hour arguing with League officials about whether Mars and Jupiter could legally leave the estate perimeter, the second hour on the phone with Cynthia getting emergency authorization, and the third hour sitting in silence while Mars pressed her face against the window like she hadn't seen the sky in years. She hadn't. Not really. A month inside the estate grounds, and before that, the holding facility. Before that, the chaos of the Spear Pillar operation, which hadn't exactly been a sightseeing tour. Jupiter sat across the aisle with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes closed, but she wasn't sleeping. Ash could tell by the tension in her shoulders and the way her fingers twitched every time the transport hit turbulence, processing, calculating, running scenarios. She'd been doing it since he'd told them about the mission that morning. Her mind was a machine that never idled. Pikachu sat on Ash's lap, ears rotating like satellite dishes, tracking every sound. He'd been agitated since they'd left the estate. Something in the air bothered him, a static charge that had nothing to do with electricity. "Tell me about the Veilstone facility," Ash said. Jupiter opened her eyes. Galactic Substation 12. Officially a meteorological research post. Unofficially, Karen's personal laboratory for dimensional energy experiments. It was supposed to have been decommissioned after our arrest. Supposed to have been. Sharon designed the facility. If he built hidden compartments, and he did, because Sharon always builds hidden compartments, the League's sweep would have missed them. Standard decommission protocol checks for active equipment and hazardous materials. It doesn't check for rooms that aren't on the blueprints. Mars pulled away from the window. I went to Substation 12 twice. Both times, Sharon had entire sections locked down. No entry without his personal authorization. He told Cyrus it was for contamination safety. Even Cyrus didn't push back on it, which should tell you something. "It tells me Cyrus trusted him," Ash said. "It tells you Cyrus was afraid of what Sharon knew," Jupiter corrected quietly. "There's a difference." The transport began its descent. Veilstone City spread out below them, gray and angular, a city built on stone and stubbornness. The Galactic headquarters had been here, once. The building still stood, repurposed now as a League administration center, but the scars were visible if you knew where to look: blast marks on the lower floors, replacement windows that didn't quite match, a parking lot that used to be a weapons depot. Mars stared at it as they flew over. Her expression was unreadable. The research facility sat on Veilstone's eastern outskirts, a squat concrete building nestled against a hillside that looked like every other government research post in Sinnoh, boring on purpose. The kind of building designed to attract zero attention, which was, of course, exactly why Galactic had used it. League investigators had already swept the site. Yellow tape cordoned off the entrance. 2 officers stood guard, looking bored in the way that people look bored when they've been standing in front of a concrete building for 18 hours. Their boredom evaporated when they saw Mars and Jupiter step out of the transport. Champion Ketchum. The senior officer, a tall man with a grow lithe at his heel, stepped forward. His eyes were on the 2 women. "We weren't informed you'd be bringing consultants." "Emergency authorization from Champion Cynthia," Ash said, handing over the documentation on his tablet. "They have intelligence clearance for this site specifically." The officer read the authorization. "Read it again." Looked at Mars, who smiled at him with all her teeth. Looked at Jupiter, who didn't look at him at all. "Understood, sir." He stepped aside. His grow lithe didn't. The fire type growled low in its throat, hackles up, staring at Mars with the fixed intensity of a Pokémon that smelled something it didn't like. Mars crouched down. The officer tensed. Ash watched. "Hey," Mars said to the grow lithe. Her voice was different, softer, without the edge she used on people. I know. I smell like trouble. It's okay. The Growlithe's growl stuttered. Its nose twitched. Mars extended her hand, palm down, fingers relaxed. The fire type sniffed it cautiously, then sneezed, then wagged its tail once before catching itself and resuming its professional demeanor. Mars stood up. Caught Ash looking at her. What? She said, defensive. Nothing. I like Pokemon. That's not a crime. I didn't say it was. Stop smiling. He stopped smiling. He didn't stop feeling like smiling. Inside, the facility was a mess. Not from the break-in, from the investigation. Evidence markers littered the floor. Drawers hung open. Equipment had been pulled from shelves and catalogued on folding tables. Jupiter walked through the wreckage with her hands behind her back, moving with the precise economy of someone who'd done this 100 times before but from the other side. She stopped at the main laboratory, a long room with workbenches and shattered monitors, and stood in the center, turning slowly. They didn't come through the front door, she said. The lead investigator, a woman named Holt who'd been trailing them with barely concealed irritation, frowned. The entry point was the East Service corridor. We've already, no. That was the exit point. They came in through the subfloor. Jupiter pointed at the ground. This is a Sharon facility. There's a sub-basement that's not on your blueprints. The entry point is, she walked to the far wall, counting tiles. Stopped. Pressed 2 tiles simultaneously, one high, one low. A section of floor hissed and slid aside, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Holt stared. The investigative team stared. Mars looked smug on Jupiter's behalf, which was a new dynamic. We swept this facility top to bottom, Holt said, her voice flat with the sound of professional embarrassment. You swept the facility that exists on paper, Jupiter said. Karen's facilities always have a second layer. Ash looked down the stairs. Cool air drifted up from below, carrying a smell like ozone and something else, something metallic and wrong, like the ghost of a thunderstorm in a sealed room. Pikachu. The electric mouse's ears flattened. His cheeks sparked, but unevenly, one side brighter than the other. Ash had never seen that before. Something's down there, Mars said. She'd moved to Ash's side without him noticing, close enough that her arm brushed his. Something that's bothering your Pikachu, and not much bothers your Pikachu. Stay behind me, Ash said. Absolutely not, Mars said, and went down the stairs first. Jupiter followed. Then Ash, with Pikachu on his shoulder and one hand on Infernape's pokeball. Holt and 2 officers brought up the rear. The sub-basement was larger than the building above it. Sharon had hollowed out a significant portion of the hillside, a cathedral of steel and concrete, lit by emergency strips that cast everything in sickly yellow. Equipment lined the walls, machines Ash couldn't identify, monitors displaying data in formats he couldn't read, cables running along the ceiling like mechanical veins. Jupiter went straight to the central console. Her fingers moved across the interface with the familiarity of someone returning to a keyboard they'd played 1,000 times. He was studying the Spear Pillar event, she said, reading data as it scrolled. Not just studying it, harvesting it. These instruments were designed to capture residual dimensional energy from the tear Cyrus created. He's been collecting it, storing it, refining it. For what? Ash asked. I need more time to, she stopped. Her fingers froze over the keyboard. Ash. The way she said his name, with urgency, with something close to fear, brought him to her side in 2 steps. The screen showed a map of Sinnoh. Scattered across it were points of light, blue, pulsing, irregular. Concentrated around an coronet but spreading outward in a pattern that looked organic. Like cracks in ice. Like veins in a body. What am I looking at? Ash asked. Fracture points, Jupiter said. Locations where the dimensional barrier is compromised. Where the fabric of reality is. She searched for the word. Thin. The null zones, Ash said. Cynthia mentioned them. Areas where pokeballs stop working, moves fizzle out. Those are the visible symptoms. These, she gestured at the screen. These are the actual wounds. And they're spreading. Karen's data is 3 weeks old, and there are already 40% more fracture points than what Cynthia's rangers have reported. Mars was standing at the edge of the room, near a section of wall that was different from the rest. Where the other walls were steel and concrete, this one was rough stone, natural rock, unfinished, as if the excavation had stopped here for a reason. She reached out and touched it. Mars, don't, Jupiter began. Mars's hand made contact with the stone, and every light in the sub-basement flickered. Pikachu shrieked, a sharp, electric cry of distress, and the air pressure changed, like someone had opened an airlock. Ash's ears popped. His vision blurred at the edges. And then he felt it. Nothing. Not darkness. Not cold. Not absence. Nothing, a void so complete that his mind couldn't process it, like trying to see a color that didn't exist. It pressed against the thin stone wall like water against a dam, and for one horrible instant, Ash understood on a bone-deep level that something was on the other side. Something that wasn't alive or dead, wasn't malevolent or benevolent, but simply was not, and it was pushing against the membrane of reality with the patient inevitability of erosion. Mars snatched her hand back. The light stabilized. The pressure normalized. Pikachu buried his face in Ash's neck, trembling. What, Mars said, her voice shaking, the hell was that? Jupiter was pale. Ash had never seen her pale before. She maintained her composure with the same rigor she applied to everything, but right now she was gray-white, and her hands on the console were not steady. A null zone, she said. But not like the ones on the surface. Those are pinpricks. This is, she looked at the wall. This is a wound. Holt and her officers had retreated to the staircase. The Growlithe was barking. Even the humans could feel it, the wrongness seeping through the stone. We need to leave, Ash said. Now. And we need to seal this room. They moved. Jupiter grabbed a data drive and downloaded everything she could in 30 seconds flat, her fingers flying across the interface with the desperate speed of someone who knew the value of information. Mars went up the stairs fast, not running but wanting to. Ash went last, Pikachu pressed against him, and he didn't breathe easily until the subfloor hatch sealed shut behind them. Outside, in the afternoon sunlight, the four of them stood in the facility parking lot and didn't speak for a full minute. That wasn't just dimensional residue, Jupiter finally said. She was holding the data drive like a lifeline. Karen's notes reference something he calls the substrate. A layer of existence beneath spacetime. He theorizes that when Cyrus tore open reality at Spear Pillar, he didn't just create a portal to Dialga and Palkia's dimensions. He cracked something deeper. Something that was never meant to be opened. And now it's leaking, Mars said. Seeping, Jupiter corrected. Slowly. Through the fracture points. But the rate is increasing. Ash looked up at the sky. It was clear, blue, normal. The mountains in the distance were solid and real. The world felt fine. But underneath it, underneath everything, something was pressing upward, and the pressure was growing. How long? He asked. Jupiter's jaw tightened. I need to analyze the full dataset. But based on the growth rate shown in Karen's records, months. Not years. And Sharon is harvesting this energy, Ash said. The dimensional fracture energy. He's using it. He's using the symptoms of the disease as fuel, Jupiter said. Which means he either doesn't understand what he's accelerating, or he doesn't care. It's Sharon, Mars said grimly. He doesn't care. Ash turned to Holt, who was standing at a distance with her team, visibly unsettled. Seal the facility. Full lockdown. Nothing in or out. And get this information to Champion Cynthia immediately. Holt nodded. She didn't argue with his authority. Whatever they'd all felt down there had burned the argument out of her. On the transport back to Heart Home, Mars sat next to Ash instead of across the aisle. She didn't explain why. He didn't ask. Jupiter sat behind them, headphones in, listening to nothing, staring at the data drive in her hands with the intensity of someone solving an equation that might save the world. Pikachu fell asleep in Ash's lap. His sparking had settled, but his paws twitched with uneasy dreams. Ash closed his eyes and saw it again, the nothing behind the wall. The patient, enormous absence pressing against reality like a tide against sand. He was 15 years old, and the world was cracking open. They got back to the estate at dusk. Ash was exhausted, the deep kind of tired that came from adrenaline and dread rather than physical exertion. He wanted to shower, eat something that wasn't a ration bar, and sleep for 12 hours. He got none of those things. There was someone sitting on his front steps. The young man stood as the transport landed. He was tall, taller than Ash by a head, with ice-blonde hair cropped short and eyes the color of a frozen lake. He wore a trainer's coat in deep blue with the insignia of the Snowpoint Academy on the shoulder, and 6 pokeballs on his belt arranged with military precision. He moved like a fighter, balanced, aware, ready. "Champion Ketchum," the young man said. His voice was quiet but carried like a command. "My name is Kale Astor. I'm here to challenge you." Mars stepped out of the transport behind Ash. "We're busy. Come back never." Kale's gaze shifted to her. Then to Jupiter, exiting behind Mars. His expression didn't change, but something in it hardened, a tightening around the eyes, a stillness in the jaw. "I see the rumors are true," he said. "The League champion keeps war criminals as household staff." "They're not," Ash began. "I know who they are. Commander Mars. Commander Jupiter. Responsible for the Valley Windworks assault, the Celestic Town bombing, the Lake Guardian kidnappings, and direct participation in the Spear Pillar event. Combined civilian casualties, 47 injured, 3 dead." He recited it like he was reading a police report. "And here they are, playing house with a teenager." Mars's fists clenched. Jupiter's expression didn't change, but she went very still, the stillness of a chess player seeing a threat on the board. "Who the hell do you?" Mars started. "The 3 people who died at Celestic Town were researchers," Kale said, cutting her off. "One of them was my mother's colleague. She was 53 years old. She had a Lux Ray that wouldn't leave her body. The Pokemon Rangers had to sedate it." He looked at Jupiter. "Your operation. Your orders." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush stone. Jupiter didn't deny it. She didn't explain, didn't justify, didn't offer context. She stood in the evening light and absorbed the accusation like she was absorbing a physical blow, and something in her eyes, behind the mask, behind the calculation, was devastated. "I know," she said. 2 words. No defense. No deflection. Kale stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned back to Ash. "I challenge you, champion. Full 6-on-6 battle. Sinnoh League regulations. If I win, I take the title, and they go back to prison where they belong." Ash's response came from a place deeper than thought. "The title's not theirs to lose. You want to battle me, fine. But their fate isn't your bargaining chip. Then what are the stakes? Same as they always are. Your best against mine. That should be enough." Kale's frozen eyes measured him. What he found there, determination, conviction, something that couldn't be bluffed, seemed to satisfy him. He nodded once. "Tomorrow morning. Your arena." He walked away into the gathering dark without looking back. Efficient. No wasted motion. Even his departure was disciplined. Mars watched him go with her arms crossed, radiating hostility. I hate him. He has a right to be angry, Jupiter said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. He's not wrong. About any of it. Jup, 47 injured. 3 dead. I remember every operation report. She turned and walked into the house. Her footsteps on the stairs were silent, as always, but the door to her room closed with a firmness that was its own kind of scream. Mars looked at Ash. Her anger had shifted, it was still there, but it had folded inward, become something more complicated. She carries it, Mars said quietly. All of it. Every mission, every casualty. She pretends she doesn't, but she has a list in her head. Names, dates, outcomes. She recites them when she thinks no one can hear. Do you? Mars was quiet for a moment. I burn mine. In my head. Every night. And every morning they grow back. She looked at the house, at Jupiter's window, where the light had just come on. The difference between me and Jup is that I feel it like fire. She feels it like ice. Neither one is better. She went inside. Ash stood in the courtyard with Pikachu, watching the stars come out over the mountains, and thought about the weight that people carry and the different shapes it takes. He found Jupiter in the library at midnight. Not sitting, standing, her back to the door, hands flat on the reading table, head bowed. The book she'd been working through, the one with her tactical notes, the one she'd been silently sharing with Ash for weeks, was open in front of her. He almost turned around. Almost left her to her privacy. But something in the angle of her shoulders stopped him, a brittleness that didn't belong on a woman who held herself like a fortress. You don't have to fight tomorrow, he said. I'm not fighting. You are. I mean, you don't have to watch. If it's going to, what? Remind me of what I've done. Jupiter turned. Her eyes were dry, but reddened, and the mask was completely gone. Without it, she looked younger. Rawer. Human in a way that hurt to see. I don't need reminders, Ash. I remember perfectly. That's the problem. He stepped into the room. Closed the distance between them slowly, the way you approached a wounded Pokémon, no sudden movements, no pressure, just presence. Tell me, he said. Tell you what? Whatever you need to say. Jupiter stared at him. Her mouth worked. For a moment he thought she'd put the mask back on, retreat behind the walls, shut the door. She'd done it a dozen times before. It was what she was built for, containment, control, the elegant suppression of everything that made her vulnerable. Instead, she sat down. It was less like sitting and more like her legs deciding they were done holding her up. I was 17 when Cyrus recruited me, she said. I was living in Jubilife. Working 2 jobs. I had a Zubat I'd caught outside the city, my only Pokémon. I was nobody. Less than nobody. She pressed her palms against the table. Cyrus told me the world was broken. That it ran on lies and cruelty and the strong devouring the weak, and that the only solution was to tear it down and start over. And I believed him, not because I thought he was right, but because I wanted him to be right. Because if the world was broken, then it wasn't my fault that I was broken too. The library was quiet. Ash sat down across from her and said nothing. I was good at it, Jupiter continued. Organization. Strategy. Logistics. I could plan an operation in my sleep. And Cyrus rewarded competence, that was his gift. He made you feel useful. Necessary. For someone who'd never been either, that was. She trailed off. I designed the Celestic Town operation. I planned the entry, the timeline, the extraction. I accounted for every variable except one, the researchers who wouldn't evacuate. My plan called for them to flee. They didn't. They stayed to protect their data, their life's work. And my operatives followed the protocol I'd written, which prioritized the mission over civilian safety. Her hands were shaking. She clasped them together, knuckles white. 3 people died because I wrote a protocol that said the mission came first. I didn't pull the trigger. I didn't give the order to use force. But I built the machine, and the machine did what machines do. Jupiter, that boy outside. Kale. He's right. About all of it. I don't deserve this. She gestured around the library, the warm light, the books, the comfortable chair. I don't deserve this. I deserve the black site. I deserve the concrete room. No, Ash said. You don't, no. You don't deserve that. Nobody does. He leaned forward. You did terrible things. You said it yourself, and you're right. But you know what the people who actually deserve black sites look like? They're the ones who don't lose sleep over it. They're the ones who don't carry lists of names in their heads. They're the ones who wouldn't be sitting in a library at midnight shaking because a stranger reminded them of what they've done. Jupiter looked at him. Her eyes were searching, desperately, hungrily, for the lie. The angle. The manipulation. The hidden cost of his kindness. She couldn't find it. It wasn't there. I don't understand you, she said, and it sounded like a confession. That's okay. You don't have to understand me. You just have to trust me. I don't trust anyone. I know. But you're sitting here talking to me at midnight instead of staring at the wall alone. That's a start. Something broke behind Jupiter's eyes. Not violently, gently, like ice giving way to the first warmth of spring. She didn't cry. Jupiter didn't cry. But she breathed, deep and unsteady, and when she exhaled, some of the rigidity left her spine. I'll watch the battle tomorrow, she said. You don't have to. I want to. She paused. I want to see you win. It was the most openly personal thing she'd ever said to him. They both felt the weight of it. Then I'd better win, Ash said. Something that was almost, a smile crossed Jupiter's face. Based on my tactical analysis of your training patterns, your probability of victory against a skilled but conventional opponent is approximately 83%. Only 83? You have a tendency to improvise in the middle third of a battle, which introduces unpredictable variables. It's both your greatest strength and your most significant vulnerability. Ash grinned. You've been analyzing me. Jupiter's almost smile vanished, replaced by a very faint blush that she would deny to her dying day. I analyze everything. It's compulsive. Don't read into it. Wouldn't dream of it. He stood. Paused at the door. Jupiter. Yes. For what it's worth, the person who designed that protocol at 17 isn't the person sitting in this library right now. People change. You've changed. And I'd rather have you here, changing, than locked in a cell staying the same. He left before she could respond. But as he walked down the hall, he heard, very faintly, through the library door, a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob or might have been both at once. Morning came sharp and cold. Ash was up before dawn, running drills with his team in the gray pre-light. Infernape shadowboxed against the rocky outcrop, fists wreathed in dim flame. Staraptor carved circles overhead. Pikachu ran agility patterns through a course Ash had set up the week before, his speed blurring him into a yellow streak. Bizel worked water pressure in the pool. Torterra meditated in the garden, ancient and immovable. Glisker hung from the arena rafters, watching everything with bright eyes and occasional chirps of commentary. 6 Pokémon. Each one a story. Each one a partnership forged in adversity and trust. Kale arrived at exactly 8 o'clock. He brought no entourage, no supporters, no witnesses. Just himself and his 6 pokeballs and the cold, focused intensity of a trainer who had come to prove something. But word had gotten out. A small crowd gathered at the estate's perimeter, trainers, locals, a few media drones that Ash's security system was actively swatting out of the sky. Dawn and Brock arrived at 7:30, having received Ash's message the night before. "You're really doing this," Dawn said, watching Kale warm up on the opposite side of the arena with a precision that was frankly intimidating. "He challenged me. Can't exactly say no." "You could say no. You just won't." "Same thing." Brock was studying Kale with the practiced eye of a former gym leader. "He's Snowpoint Academy. Top of his class, from what I've heard. Specializes in ice and steel types, defensive walls with counterpunch capabilities. He won't come at you head-on. He'll try to control the pace, wear you down, and punish mistakes." "Sounds familiar," Ash said. "Paul used to do the same thing. Paul relied on raw power. This kid relies on perfection. Different kind of dangerous." Mars appeared at the edge of the arena, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed. She'd been there for 20 minutes. Jupiter sat in the stands, her book in her lap but closed. Both of them were watching Kale with the assessing gazes of women who understood combat. "His stance is good," Mars murmured, half to herself. "Balanced. Patient. He's not nervous." "Should I be?" Ash asked. Mars looked at him. The old fire was in her eyes, competitive, fierce, alive. "No," she said. "You should be excited." He was. They met in the center of the arena. Ash on one end, Kale on the other, the morning sun slanting between them like a blade. "Standard League rules," Ash said. 6 on 6. Substitutions allowed. First trainer to lose all 6 Pokemon loses. Agreed. Kale's hand was already on his first Pokeball. "And Ketchum, I want you to know this isn't personal. I respect what you did at the league finals. Beating Tobias was extraordinary. But the champion's title carries responsibility beyond battle skill. And I don't think you're carrying it well. Guess we'll find out." Kale threw first. The Pokeball opened in a flash of light and an Empoleon materialized, massive, regal, its steel-coated flippers gleaming. It stood with the poise of a Pokemon that had never lost a battle and expected the streak to continue. Ash's hand moved past Pikachu, past Infernape, the obvious choices against a steel water type, and settled on a ball that made Brock raise his eyebrows. "Torterra, I choose you." The continent Pokemon appeared with a seismic thud, the tree on his back swaying. Ground type against water type. Not the conventional play. Kale's eyes narrowed, recalculating. Good. Ash wanted him recalculating. Empoleon, Hydro Pump. The blast of water came fast and hard, a pressurized cannon that could cut steel. But Torterra didn't move. He set. His massive claws dug into the arena floor, his shell angled to deflect, and the hydro pump hit him like a wave hitting a cliff. Water exploded outward. Torterra slid back 6 inches. "No more." "Stone Edge." Ash called. Torterra roared, a sound like tectonic plates grinding, and the arena floor erupted. Pillars of sharpened stone shot upward in a cascading wave, not aimed at Empoleon directly but surrounding it, cutting off escape routes, turning the open field into a maze of stone columns. Kale adapted instantly. Ice Beam, clear a path. Empoleon fired, shattering columns, creating openings. But Torterra was already moving, slow by any standard, but with a kind of geological inevitability. He didn't chase. He advanced. Each step shook the ground. Each step closed the distance. "Leaf Storm!" Ash shouted. The attack came from above, the tree on Torterra's back whipping up a cyclone of razor leaves that screamed down through the stone maze. Empoleon raised its flippers to block, but the leaves came from too many angles, and the steel type staggered, cuts opening across its hide. Aqua Jet, close the distance. Kale commanded. Empoleon launched itself forward in a torpedo of water, aimed directly at Torterra's face. Fast. Brutal. The kind of attack that relied on speed and precision. Ash smiled. Catch it. Torterra's jaws opened, massive, ancient, lined with teeth that had been grinding stone for decades, and caught the incoming Empoleon by the flipper. The water type's momentum died instantly, absorbed by a Pokémon that weighed half a ton. Torterra held it, jaws clamped, Empoleon struggling. Earthquake. The arena broke. Not cracked, broke. A shockwave radiated from Torterra's planted feet, and the ground heaved like a living thing. Empoleon took the full force of it at point-blank range while being held in place. The water type's eyes went wide, then dim. Torterra opened his jaws. Empoleon collapsed. Empoleon is unable to battle. From the stands, Mars let out a sound that she would later describe as a tactical assessment vocalization, and that everyone else would describe as a whoop. Jupiter's hands tightened on her closed book. She said nothing. But her eyes were very bright. Kale recalled Empoleon with a steady hand. No frustration. No surprise. He studied Torterra with fresh eyes and reached for his second Pokeball. Weevil. The dark ice type appeared in a burst of shadow, sleek and wicked and fast, so fast that it was already moving before its feet touched the ground, a blur of claws and malice. Ice Shard fired before Kale even called for it, a trained reflex, needle-sharp projectiles of frozen air streaking toward Torterra's tree. Torterra, return. Ash swapped instantly. Torterra had done his job, removing Empoleon and reshaping the terrain. No point risking him against an ice type. Infernape. The fire type burst onto the field with a battle cry and a corona of flame, eyes already locked on Weevil. These two were natural opposites, fire and ice, speed and speed, aggression meeting aggression. Mach Punch. Ash called. Infernape vanished. Not literally, but close enough. Mach Punch was a priority move, faster than thought, and Infernape had been training it for weeks. He crossed the distance between himself and Weevil in a blink and drove a fist into the ice type's midsection. Weevil folded, but twisted as it did, raking its claws across Infernape's arm. Night Slash. Dark energy crackled. Infernape hissed but didn't retreat. Ice Punch. Kale said. Flare Blitz. Both Pokémon charged. They met in the center of the arena in a collision of fire and frost that sent steam billowing in all directions. The audience couldn't see the impact, but they heard it, a concussive boom that rattled the stands. When the steam cleared, Weevil was down. Infernape stood over it, breathing hard, one arm frosted, eyes blazing. 2 down. 4 to go. Kale's third Pokémon was a Bronzong, Steel Psychic, a floating fortress of defense. Fourth was a Mamoswine, Ice Ground, a battering ram of tusks and fury. Fifth was a Lucario, Fighting Steel, disciplined and dangerous. Each one pushed Ash harder. Bronzong walled out Infernape with Reflect and Light Screen, forcing Ash to switch to Glisker, who carved through the barriers with Night Slash and sheer tenacity. Mamoswine caught Glisker with an Ice Fang that nearly ended the Bat-Scorpion's run, but Bizel, Ash's fourth rotation, Ice punched the mammoth in the jaw from below and finished it with a spinning Aqua Jet that drew gasps from the crowd. Lucario was the hardest. Kale's ace was a mirror of its trainer, precise, patient, and devastatingly skilled. It fought Pikachu in a mid-arena duel that lasted 7 minutes and felt like an hour, the two small fighters trading blows at a speed that the naked eye could barely track. Aura Sphere against Thunderbolt. Close combat against Iron Tail. Pikachu's speed against Lucario's prediction. Mars was on her feet. She'd stopped pretending she wasn't invested. Come on, hit it from the left, Jupiter was leaning forward in her seat, knuckles white around her book, lips moving silently, running calculations, predicting patterns, seeing the battle 3 moves ahead. Pikachu took a close combat to the ribs that sent him tumbling. He hit the ground hard, rolled, and came up sparking. Lucario pressed the advantage, Bone Rush, the staff of aura energy spinning in its paws, closing the distance for the finish. Pikachu, Electro-Ebb on the ground. Not at Lucario. On the ground. The web of electricity spread across the arena floor like a net, and Lucario's feet hit it mid-stride. The fighting type stumbled, just a fraction of a second, just enough, and Pikachu was already in the air, launched off a patch of rubble, spinning, tail glowing with iron tail, every remaining volt pouring into Thunderbolt simultaneously. The combination attack, Iron Tail's momentum channeling Thunderbolt's voltage, hit Lucario in the crown of its head. The arena floor cratered. Lucario dropped to one knee. Then the other. Then flat. 5 down. Kale stood on his platform, 5 Pokeballs spent, 1 remaining. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with something fierce, not anger, not desperation, but the pure, white-hot focus of a trainer who refused to go down without a fight. "You're everything they said you were," he told Ash across the shattered field. "Better, maybe. You're no slouch yourself. One more." Kale held up his final Pokeball. "I saved my strongest for last. Not because I thought I'd need it, because I wanted to see if you deserve to face it." He threw the ball. The Pokémon that materialized was a Glaceon, small, elegant, its crystalline fur catching the light in a way that turned it into a living prism. It stood on the broken arena floor with a delicacy that belied the power rolling off it in visible waves of cold air. Ash's eyes widened. He could feel it from across the field, the sheer depth of this Pokémon's training. This wasn't a battle partner. This was a masterwork. Years of development. Thousands of hours. The bond between Kale and this Glaceon was visible in the way the Ice-type moved, the way it positioned itself without being told, the way its eyes tracked Pikachu with patient, professional respect. "This is going to hurt," Ash murmured. Pikachu's ears went flat. He agreed. Glaceon, blizzard. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in 1 second. The blizzard erupted not from Glaceon's mouth but from the air itself, as if the Ice-type had convinced the atmosphere to turn hostile. Snow and hail and frozen wind tore across the arena, and Pikachu braced against it, sparking, but the cold was sapping his strength, slowing his movements, turning his speed, his greatest asset, into a liability. "Thunderbolt!" Ash called. Pikachu fired, a brilliant arc of electricity that split the blizzard. Glaceon didn't dodge. It split the Thunderbolt with an ice beam so precisely aimed that it intercepted the lightning mid-flight, freezing it into a crystal lattice that shattered harmlessly. Mars said something unrepeatable. Jupiter's mouth was open. "That's not possible," she said. The timing required, the precision, it was possible. Kale had made it possible through the sheer, stubborn application of talent and time. His Glaceon was a defensive miracle, and every attack Pikachu threw was answered, countered, neutralized. Ash watched the pattern. Felt the flow of the battle. Kale was trying to control the pace, Brock had called it exactly. Slow the fight down. Force Ash to play Kale's game. Punish mistakes. Ash didn't play other people's games. Pikachu. Quick attack, straight up. Pikachu's eyes widened. Then he understood. He launched himself vertically, not at Glaceon, not to dodge, but straight up into the sky above the arena, higher than the stands, higher than the rafters, a yellow streak rocketing into the cold blue morning. Kale looked up. Glaceon looked up. Everyone looked up. "Thunderbolt," Ash said. "Everything you've got. Into the blizzard." Pikachu, at the apex of his jump, lit up like a second sun. The Thunderbolt didn't fire downward, it fired into the blizzard itself, into the millions of ice crystals and water droplets suspended in the air, and every single one of them became a conductor. The blizzard turned electric. Lightning forked through the storm in a cascading chain reaction, and Glacian, standing in the center of its own weather, took hits from every direction. Not one thunderbolt. 1,000, reflected and amplified through the frozen air that Glacian itself had created. The ice-type screamed. Kale screamed. Glacian, protect. Too late. The electrified blizzard collapsed inward like a dying star, and when it cleared, Glacian was down, its crystalline fur scorched and sparking, unconscious on a field of melted ice. Pikachu landed hard. His legs buckled. He stayed up through sheer, stubborn will. Silence. Then the small crowd erupted. Kale stared at the field. At his Glacian. At the boy on the other platform who had just turned his own Pokémon's greatest attack into a weapon against it, using nothing but creativity and absolute trust in his partner. He recalled Glacian. Held the Pokeball gently. Then he stepped down from his platform and walked across the destroyed arena to where Ash was kneeling beside Pikachu, checking the electric mouse for injuries. That move, Kale said. Using the blizzard as a conduction medium. That wasn't something you planned. No, Ash admitted. I saw the ice crystals in the air and just knew. Instinct. Yeah. Kale was quiet for a moment. Around them, the arena steamed. Dawn was clapping. Brock was grinning. Mars was shouting something celebratory that was mostly profanity. You're better than I expected, Kale said. He extended his hand. I was wrong about your skill. I'm not sure I was wrong about the rest. Ash took his hand. Gripped it firmly. Come back in 3 months. Ask Mars and Jupiter yourself whether they're still who they used to be. If you still think I'm wrong, challenge me again. Kale held the handshake for a beat longer than necessary. His frozen eyes thawed, just a fraction. You're either the bravest trainer I've ever met or the most foolish. I've been told it's both. Kale almost smiled. Almost. Then he turned and walked away, and Ash watched him go and thought, that's someone I want on my side when things get bad. Things were going to get bad. He could feel it. 2 days after the battle, Mars cornered Ash in the training arena while he was cleaning up. That move with the blizzard, she said, leaning against the wall in the pose she'd adopted as her default, arms crossed, hip cocked, chin up. Defiant even when she wasn't defying anything. Where did you learn that? I didn't learn it. It just happened. Things don't just happen. Not in battle. Not like that. Ash shrugged, wiping down equipment. I see patterns. In the field, in the air, in the way a Pokémon moves. Sometimes the pattern shows me something I can use. I can't really explain it better than that. Mars studied him. The aggressive suspicion that had defined their first weeks together had evolved into something different, an aggressive curiosity, a need to understand that she pursued with the same intensity she'd once brought to military operations. You're not normal, she said. Thanks. It's not a compliment. Normal is safe. Normal is predictable. She waved a hand, frustrated by her own inability to articulate it. You're a variable. You walk into situations that should kill you and walk out with friends and victories and you don't even realize how absurd that is. You sound like you're worried about me. Mars's face went pink. I am not, I am concerned about the stability of my living situation, which depends on you not getting yourself killed in some, Mars. What? It's okay to care about people. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. The blush deepened from pink to scarlet, nearly matching her hair. I don't care about you, she said, with the conviction of someone lying through their teeth. You're my jailer. I have Stockholm Syndrome at best. You don't have Stockholm Syndrome. How would you know? Because people with Stockholm Syndrome don't argue with their captors about breakfast cereal for 20 minutes every morning. Mars tried to maintain her glare. Failed. The corner of her mouth twitched, fought it, twitched again, and then she was laughing, short and sharp and genuine, a sound that Ash had heard exactly 3 times since she'd arrived and treasured each one. "You're impossible," she said. "I've heard that before, too." They stood in the training arena, the afternoon light slanting through the high windows, dust motes floating between them. Mars's laughter faded, but the warmth of it lingered in her eyes, a warmth she hadn't had when she'd arrived, a warmth she didn't know what to do with. "Ash." "Yeah." She seemed to fight something inside herself. Her hands uncrossed, recrossed, dropped to her sides. "If Sharon comes, if things go bad. I want to fight. Not from the sidelines. Not as an asset or a consultant. I want to fight beside you." "You will." "You say that like it's simple." "It is simple. You're strong. You're smart. You know the enemy better than anyone. Why would I leave you behind?" Mars looked at him. In her eyes, something shifted, a tectonic realignment, deep and slow, plates moving into a new configuration. She didn't name it. Didn't acknowledge it. But it was there, and Ash saw it, and something in his own chest responded. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay." She left the arena. Ash stood alone with the dust motes and the light and the realization that his chest was doing something his brain hadn't authorized. Pikachu, sitting on the equipment rack, said "Pika Pie" in a tone that was unmistakably smug. "Shut up," Ash said, without heat. The night Saturn came, the moon was full. Ash was in the study, going over Jupiter's analysis of Karen's data with growing unease. She'd spent 3 days dissecting the stolen information, cross-referencing it with her knowledge of Galactic's technology and Karen's methods, and the picture she'd assembled was terrifying in its clarity. "He's building an amplifier," Jupiter said, pointing to a schematic she'd reconstructed from fragments. "Not to create dimensional fractures, the fractures already exist, thanks to the spear pillar event. He's building a device to widen them. To stabilize the cracks so they don't seal naturally." "Why would he want to keep them open?" "Because whatever is on the other side, the substrate entity, the null force, whatever it is, it's a power source. An infinite one. If Sharon can create a stable conduit, he can channel that energy into," she stopped. Reorganized her thoughts. "Into anything. Weapons. Machines. Pokemon enhancement. Himself. The applications are limitless, and so is the energy, because the substrate isn't a dimension with finite resources. It's the absence of dimension. It's the nothing between the somethings. You can't drain nothing. But channeling it would widen the fractures. Exponentially. Every joule he pulls through makes the cracks bigger. And bigger cracks mean more null zones, more reality degradation, more." The perimeter alarm went off. Not the security alert, the silent one. The one that pinged Ash's personal communicator with a vibration pattern that meant someone had breached the outer fence. Ash was on his feet instantly. Jupiter was right behind him, her analysis forgotten, her posture shifting from academic to operative in the space of a heartbeat. Mars appeared in the study doorway, barefoot, alert, a kitchen knife in her hand because she didn't have access to anything better. "One contact," Ash said, reading his communicator. "Southeast perimeter. Moving fast. Not trying to hide. Not an infiltrator," Jupiter said. "Someone who wants to be seen." Ash moved to the ground floor. Pikachu was already at the back door, ears up, cheeks dark with stored charge. Ash opened the door and stepped into the moonlit garden. Saturn stood at the edge of the tree line. He looked different than Ash remembered, thinner, harder, the baby-faced quality of his youth worn away by weeks on the run. His blue hair was unkempt. His uniform was gone, replaced by civilian clothes that didn't fit well. But his eyes were the same, intense, intelligent, conflicted. And he had his Pokémon. The faint glow of Pokeballs on his belt, 4 of them. Active. Ready. Saturn. Mars's voice came from behind Ash. She'd followed him out, kitchen knife discarded, hands empty, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. What the hell are you doing here? I came to talk. At midnight? Through the perimeter fence? That's not talking. That's a Spec Ops approach pattern. Old habits. Saturn's gaze moved from Mars to Jupiter, who stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the house lights. Jup. You look different. You look terrible, Jupiter replied. Something that might have been a smile ghosted across Saturn's face. Can I approach? I'm not here to fight. Ash looked at Pikachu. The electric mouse was tense but not aggressive, his cheeks sparked at low intensity, a warning, not a threat. Pikachu's instincts had saved Ash's life 100 times. If the mouse wasn't screaming danger, then Saturn was probably telling the truth. Come forward. Slowly. Hands where I can see them. Saturn approached. Stopped 10 feet away. Raised his palms. I need to tell you something. And then I need to ask you something, and you're not going to like either one. Start talking. Saturn took a breath. Sharon is 2 weeks from completing his amplifier. He set up a base camp at the summit of Spear Pillar, the exact location of the original dimensional event. The residual energy there is strongest, and he's using it to power the construction. We know about the amplifier, Jupiter said. I've been analyzing his data. Then you know what it does. What you might not know is that Sharon has already conducted 3 test activations. Small scale. Controlled. Each one widened the nearest fracture point by approximately 12%. Saturn's face was grim. The null zones that are spreading across Sinnoh. They're not natural decay. They're Karen's test runs. He's been poking holes in reality to calibrate his machine. Ash's stomach dropped. The null zones are artificial. Partially. The fractures from Spear Pillar are real. But Karen's been aggravating them, making them worse, using them as proof of concept for a full-scale activation. Saturn paused. When he activates the amplifier at full power, on top of Spear Pillar, at the epicenter of the original tear, the fractures won't just widen. They'll connect. Every crack in the dimensional barrier across Sinnoh will link into a single fissure. And whatever is on the other side will come through. The garden was silent except for the wind in the trees and Pikachu's low, continuous sparking. Now the part you won't like, Saturn said. He looked at Mars and Jupiter. Sharon wants you back. Mars stiffened. Jupiter went very still. He sent me to recruit you, Saturn continued. He said to tell you that the new world is still possible. That Cyrus's vision can be completed, not through destruction but through control. Master the substrate, master reality. He said. Saturn hesitated. He said to tell Mars that she deserves more than scrubbing floors for a child. And to tell Jupiter that her mind is wasted here. Nobody spoke. Mars's hands were clenched at her sides, knuckles white. Her face was a war, pride and anger and something that looked horribly like temptation fighting behind her eyes. Karen's words were precision targeted. He knew her. He knew the wound in her pride, the ache of being diminished, the fury of being caged. He was pulling strings he'd installed years ago. Jupiter's mask was back up, but Ash could see the cracks in it, hairline fractures in the composure, the faint tremor in her clasped hands. Sharon was offering her something she'd been starving for, purpose. Direction. The sense that her considerable mind was being used for something that mattered. The pull of the old life was tangible in the moonlit garden. Ash could feel it, the gravity of identity, of belonging, of the simple clarity of a mission. He could have argued. Could have made a case, deployed logic, appealed to their growth and their future. Could have reminded them of midnight conversations and kitchen meals and the slow, painful, beautiful process of becoming something new. He didn't. If you want to go, Ash said, go. Mars's head snapped toward him. Jupiter's eyes widened. I won't stop you. I won't chase you. I won't report you until morning, and by then you'll be in the wind. He met their eyes, first Mars, then Jupiter. His voice was steady. His hands were not, but he kept them in his pockets. But I want you to go because you choose to. Not because Sharon pulled your strings. Not because Saturn says it's the right move. Not because you're scared or angry or hurt. If you walk out of here, walk out as yourselves. Not as his commanders. The silence stretched like a wire. Mars made a sound, a choked, strangled thing that could have been a laugh or a scream or something in between. Her eyes were bright with tears she was furious about. You, she started. Stopped. Started again. You idiot. You absolute, reckless, naive, her voice broke. Nobody's ever, you can't just, she was shaking. Not with cold. Not with anger. With something she didn't have a name for, something that was too big for her body and too new for her vocabulary. You're the first person who ever told me to decide for myself, she whispered. The first. In my entire life. Do you understand that? My parents decided for me. The streets decided for me. Cyrus decided for me. And now you're standing here saying choose, like it's simple, like it's nothing, like, it's not nothing, Ash said. It's everything. That's why it has to be yours. Mars pressed her hands against her face. Her shoulders heaved once, twice. When she lowered her hands, her eyes were red and her jaw was set and her voice was iron. I'm staying, she said. Not because you want me to. Not because it's easier. Because I choose to. And if Sharon wants me back, he can come get me himself, and I'll show him what I think of his new world with my bare hands. Jupiter hadn't moved. Hadn't spoken. She stood in the doorway, framed by warm light, and her face was the blankiest Ash had ever seen it, so controlled it circled back to vulnerability, a mask pulled so tight that the pain of wearing it was visible. She looked at Saturn. At the man who'd been her colleague, her comrade, the last remaining thread connecting her to the life she'd built and lost. Saturn, she said. Is this what you want? Truly. Saturn faltered. For the first time since he'd arrived, his composure cracked, and underneath it was a young man who was tired and scared and unsure. I don't know, he admitted. I thought I did. Sharon says, I'm not asking what Sharon says. I'm asking what you believe. Saturn's mouth opened. Closed. He looked at the ground. I believe Cyrus was right about the world being broken, he said quietly. But I'm starting to think he was wrong about how to fix it. Jupiter nodded. Slowly. Like she was closing a book she'd been reading for a long time. We're done, Saturn, she said. The words were final. Absolute. The closing of a door that would not reopen. Go back. Tell Sharon whatever you want. But we're done. Saturn stood in the moonlight, alone, the last galactic commander still standing. He looked at Mars. At Jupiter. At the house behind them, warm and lit, and at the boy standing between his former colleagues with nothing but a Pikachu and the insane, magnificent conviction that people could change. He won't ask nicely next time, Saturn said. I know, Ash said. Saturn turned. Walked to the tree line. Paused. Catch 'em. Yeah. Take care of them. He vanished into the dark. The aftermath was quiet. Ash locked the perimeter. Reported Saturn's visit to Cynthia in a brief, clinical message that omitted the emotional details. Made tea, 3 cups, the same way he'd made it that first night, the ritual becoming a language they shared. They sat in the kitchen. The clock ticked. The house settled around them. Mars was the first to break. Not dramatically, not with shouting or violence or any of the explosive reactions that had defined her first weeks. She simply put her head down on her folded arms and cried. Quietly. Helplessly. The tears of someone who had been holding a wall up for years and had finally been told they could put it down. Ash sat beside her. He didn't touch her, she wasn't ready for that, her body was still coiled, still braced, still waiting for the kindness to reveal itself as a trap. But he sat close enough that she could feel his warmth, and he stayed. Jupiter watched from across the table. Her mask was thin as paper, and behind it, everything was visible, the exhaustion, the relief, the terror of having made a choice she couldn't take back. She looked at Mars crying and at Ash sitting steady, and something in her chest ached with an intensity that frightened her. She wasn't jealous. She told herself she wasn't jealous. She was merely observing that Ash's proximity to Mars was producing a visible calming effect, and that Mars's emotional state was improving, and that this was strategically optimal for group cohesion, and she was jealous. The realization hit her like an ice beam. She, Jupiter, formerly the most disciplined and emotionally controlled commander in Team Galactic, was jealous because a 15-year-old boy in a scorched jacket was sitting next to someone who wasn't her. She stood up abruptly. The chair scraped. Ash and Mars both looked up. "I'm going to encrypt the research data," Jupiter said, her voice perfectly level. "The analysis can't wait." She was gone before either of them could respond. Ash watched her go. Something about the way she'd stood, the sudden movement, the rigidity, the careful not looking, nagged at him. "She's upset," Mars said, lifting her head. Her eyes were puffy, her cheeks streaked, and she looked more real than Ash had ever seen her. "I know. Not about Saturn." Ash blinked. "Then about what?" Mars looked at him with an expression that mixed affection with exasperation in equal measure. "For a genius on the battlefield, you're incredibly dense." "What do you, go talk to her, Ash." He hesitated. Mars was still fragile, still raw from the crying, still shaky from the confrontation with Saturn. Leaving her felt wrong. "I'm fine," she said, reading him. "I've been taking care of myself since I was 12. Go. She needs you more than I do right now." The way she said she needs you carried a weight that Ash didn't fully unpack. He stood, squeezed Mars's shoulder, the first time he'd initiated physical contact with her, and she flinched but didn't pull away, and went upstairs. Jupiter's door was closed. Light leaked from underneath. He knocked. "I said I'm working on the encryption." "I know. Can I come in?" Silence. Then, yes. She was at the small desk, laptop open, data scrolling. Her posture was perfect. Her face was composed. Everything about her said, "I am fine, I am productive, I am in control." Her hands were shaking. Ash sat down on the edge of her bed. Pikachu hopped off his shoulder and curled up on the pillow, making himself comfortable in Jupiter's space with a casualness that was, in Pikachu's way, an acceptance. A statement. "This is safe territory." Jupiter noticed. Something flickered across her face. "You don't have to," she began. "I know. I'm not, like Mars. I can't just," she gestured vaguely, a rare imprecision. "I can't break down. It's not. I wasn't built that way. You weren't built anyway. You're a person, not a machine. I was a very effective machine for a very long time. And now." Jupiter's fingers stilled on the keyboard. The data scrolled, unattended. The room was quiet except for Pikachu's breathing and the faint hum of the laptop. "Now I don't know what I am," she said. "Mars knows. Mars has always known, she's fire, she's fury, she's the thing that burns. She can burn for Cyrus or burn for you or burn for herself, but she's always burning. I've never been like that. I've always been strategic. Purposeful. I need a framework. A system. A role. She looked at her hands. Without Galactic, without Cyrus, without a mission, I'm just a woman sitting at a desk running numbers for no reason. That's not true. Then what am I? Ash considered this. He was not a philosopher. He was not a psychologist. He was a trainer from Pallet Town who'd gotten very good at seeing what was in front of him and trusting what his gut told him about it. You're someone who reorganized my entire library without being asked because chaos makes you uncomfortable, he said. You're someone who writes tactical analyses in book margins and leaves them for me to find because you want to help but you're afraid of what helping means. You're someone who told Saturn to leave, not because I asked you to, but because you decided. On your own. Without a framework or a system or a role. He leaned forward. You're Jupiter. Not Commander Jupiter. Not Galactic Strategist. Just Jupiter. And that's enough. She stared at him. The mask was gone again, not torn away, but dissolved, as if his words were a solvent that it couldn't withstand. Underneath it, her face was open and uncertain and terribly, beautifully human. You say these things, she whispered. And you mean them. How do you mean them? How is it possible to just be kind without wanting something? I do want something. Jupiter flinched. There it was, the trap she'd been waiting for, the hidden cost, the string attached to every kindness. I want you to be okay, Ash said. That's it. That's all I want. Jupiter's composure broke. Not like Mars, no tears, no trembling. Jupiter's breaking was quieter, a long exhale that carried years of tension, her shoulders dropping, her spine curving, the architectural rigidity of her body finally relaxing into something that looked like rest. She didn't speak. Ash didn't push. He sat with her in the silence and let it be enough. After a while, Jupiter's hand moved from the keyboard to the edge of the desk, resting there. Not reaching. Not asking. Just, present. Available. Ash looked at her hand. Looked at her face. Understood. He didn't take her hand. Not yet. It was too soon, and they both knew it. But he put his hand on the desk 2 inches from hers, close enough that they could feel each other's warmth. Jupiter's breathing steadied. Her eyes closed. Ash. Yeah. Thank you for not leaving. I'm not going anywhere. They sat like that for a long time. 2 hands on a desk, not quite touching, in a room that smelled like old books and new beginnings. On the pillow, Pikachu opened one eye, assessed the situation, and went back to sleep with a contented sigh. The next week was the calm before the storm. Ash could feel it, the gathering pressure, the tightening of the air, the sense that the world was holding its breath before something enormous. He trained harder. His Pokémon felt it too. Infernape's flames burned hotter during sparring, Pikachu's thunderbolts left deeper scorch marks, Torterra's stone edge erupted with more force. They were responding to his intensity, matching it, feeding off it. The bond between trainer and team was a circuit, and right now the current was running high. Mars started training too. Not with Pokémon, she didn't have access to her team, but physically. Ash found her in the arena one morning, running combat drills she'd clearly learned during her galactic days, footwork patterns, evasion techniques, the kind of hand-to-hand discipline that spoke to a harder past than she'd shared. She moved with a raw, aggressive grace that was mesmerizing. She caught him watching and stopped, breathing hard, sweat darkening her hair. You're staring, she said. You're good. I was better. I'm out of practice. Want a sparring partner? Mars raised an eyebrow. You want to spar with me? I'm trained in 7 forms of close combat. I was Galactic's top-rated hand-to-hand fighter. And I've been dodging wild Pokémon attacks since I was 10. I'm quicker than I look. Mars grinned, the dangerous grin, the one that showed teeth. Your funeral, champion. She put him on the ground 4 times in the first 5 minutes. Each time, she offered a hand to help him up, and each time, her grip lingered a fraction longer than necessary. After the 5th takedown, this one he almost blocked, almost, they lay on the arena floor, breathing hard, looking at the ceiling. You're not terrible, Mars admitted. High praise. Your footwork needs complete reconstruction. Your guard is sloppy. And you telegraph your right hand like a neon sign. But otherwise? Otherwise. She turned her head. He turned his. They were lying on the ground 2 feet apart, flushed and breathing hard, and the morning light was in her hair, and her eyes were bright with exertion and something else, and for a moment the air between them was charged with a kind of electricity that had nothing to do with Pikachu. Mars looked away first. Sat up. Ran her hands through her hair. Otherwise you've got potential, she said, her voice carefully casual. If you don't get yourself killed first. From the stands, Jupiter turned a page of her book with unnecessary force and did not look up. Cynthia's emergency briefing came on a Sunday. The video call connected Ash, Cynthia, and a half-dozen league officials. The news was grim. 14 new null zones in the last week, Cynthia reported. 4 of them are large enough to affect municipal areas. The Pokemon Center in Orberg had a complete systems failure yesterday. Pokeballs wouldn't open, healing machines shut down. It lasted 6 hours. Casualties? Ash asked. No fatalities. Several Pokemon in critical condition had to be transported to Jubilife by land. But the psychological impact is significant. People are frightened. Trainers are refusing to travel near Empty Coronet. The map on screen showed the fracture points, more of them now, spreading like cracks in a windshield. The pattern was obvious even to Ash's non-scientific eye, they radiated from Spear Pillar like spokes of a wheel. What about Sharon? Ash asked. Ranger reconnaissance confirms activity at the Spear Pillar summit. Construction. Equipment. Personnel, estimated 30 to 40 former Galactic operatives. They've established a perimeter that our Rangers can't breach without engaging. Cynthia paused. There's something else. The Lake Guardians are agitated. Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf have all emerged from their lakes simultaneously. They're circling their respective bodies of water in patterns that our psychic-type specialists describe as distress signals. They feel it, Ash said. Whatever's coming through the fractures. They feel it. They're the guardians of Sinnoh's spiritual balance, knowledge, emotion, willpower. If the dimensional barrier is degrading, they'd be the first to react. Cynthia's expression was grave. Ash, I'm going to recommend a military response to the Council. An assault on Spear Pillar to destroy Karen's amplifier before he can activate it. I want to be part of it. I was counting on that. But Ash, she hesitated. Cynthia never hesitated. The null zones on the mountain are dense. In those areas, Pokeballs don't function. Moves are unreliable. If your Pokemon are outside their balls when you enter a null zone, they stay out. But if they're stored, they're trapped. Until you leave the zone, yes. We'd be fighting through areas where our primary advantage, our Pokemon, might be compromised. This isn't a standard battle. This is a military operation in hostile, unstable territory. I understand. Do you? Her eyes searched his through the screen. Because I need to ask you something, and I need you to think about it carefully before you answer. Mars and Jupiter, their knowledge of Galactic's operations, Karen's methodology, the layout of Spear Pillar itself, it's invaluable. I want to temporarily restore their Pokemon access for this mission. The words hung in the air. You want to arm them, Ash said. I want to give them the tools they need to help us. But the Council will resist. Halvard will use it as ammunition. And if anything goes wrong, if they turn, if they sabotage the mission, if they use their Pokémon against League forces, it falls on you. Your recommendation. Your responsibility. Ash didn't hesitate. Do it. Ash, I trust them, Cynthia. I trust them with my life. If that's not enough for the council, then the council can come up and coronet with us and see for themselves. Cynthia looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, once, with the finality of someone accepting a bet she hoped wouldn't cost her everything. I'll submit the authorization. The operation launches in 72 hours. Be ready. The screen went dark. Ash sat in his study and felt the weight of what was coming settle onto his shoulders. 3 days. 3 days to prepare for a battle that would determine the fate of Sinnoh. 3 days with 2 women who'd been his enemies and were now something he didn't have a word for, something more than friends, more than allies, more than whatever the rehabilitation program had intended. He found them in the kitchen. Mars was attempting dinner again, the stew had become a regular event, and it was genuinely edible now, occasionally even good. Jupiter was at the table, reading, but she looked up when Ash walked in. They both read his face. It's time, Mars said. Not a question. 72 hours. Cynthia's authorizing temporary Pokémon access for both of you. The effect was immediate. Mars's eyes went wide, shock, then hope, then a fierce, burning joy that she couldn't suppress. Her hand went to her heart, involuntary, as if feeling for something that had been missing. Purely, she whispered. Jupiter's reaction was quieter but no less profound. Her hand stilled on the book. Her eyes closed. When they opened, they were bright with something she rarely showed, emotion, raw and unguarded. Skuntank, she said. And bronzer. And, she stopped herself. Composed herself. But the composure was thin, and underneath it was a woman who was about to be reunited with her family. Because that's what Pokémon were. Ash knew it in his bones. Not tools, not weapons, not assets. Family. They'll be here tomorrow, he said. Get some rest tonight. We've got a lot of work to do. Mars set down her spatula. Walked around the kitchen counter. Stood in front of Ash. Thank you, she said. And then she hugged him. It was awkward and fierce and completely unexpected. Mars's arms wrapped around him with the grip of someone who hadn't been held in years and wasn't sure she was allowed to be held now. She was warm, Ash had always known she'd be warm, fire-type affinity running through her like a current, and she fit against him in a way that surprised them both. He hugged her back. Felt her shudder against him. Felt her hands grip his jacket like she was afraid he'd disappear. You're welcome, he said into her hair. She pulled back. Her face was red. She punched him in the shoulder, hard enough to hurt, soft enough to mean something else entirely. Don't make it weird, she said, and fled to the stove. Jupiter was watching from the table. Her expression was complex, layers of emotion stacked like geological strata. At the surface, composure. Below that, warmth. Below that, a longing so sharp it had edges. Ash met her eyes across the room. She didn't look away. He didn't either. The moment lasted 3 seconds. An eternity. A beginning. Then Jupiter said, "Your stew is burning," and Mars shrieked, and the moment dissolved into chaos and smoke and laughter, and the house felt, for the first time, like a home. Outside, the night pressed against the windows. The mountains were dark shapes against the stars. And somewhere up there, at the peak of the world, a machine hummed with the sound of reality coming undone. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, there was stew, and laughter, and 2 hands on a desk not quite touching, and a Pikachu stealing berries, and the fragile, extraordinary, hard-won piece of people learning to be something new. Ash savored it. Every second. He had a feeling it wouldn't last. Chapter 3, The Edge of Worlds. The Pokémon arrived at dawn. A League transport, smaller than the one that had delivered Mars and Jupiter a lifetime ago, pulled through the estate gates in the grey morning light. 2 officers stepped out, carrying reinforced containment cases marked with Sinnoh League security seals and biometric locks. Mars was already outside. She'd been there since 4 in the morning, sitting on the front steps in the cold, unable to sleep, unable to do anything but wait. She was wearing Ash's stolen tournament shirt over her regular clothes, which she'd stopped pretending she hadn't stolen weeks ago. Her red hair was unbrushed. Her eyes were raw from a night of not crying. Jupiter stood in the doorway behind her, composed as ever, but her hands, usually so still, were clasped tightly enough that the tendons stood out like cables. Ash watched from the side. Pikachu was on his shoulder, quiet for once, sensing the gravity of the moment. The first officer opened the containment case and released the Pokeballs with practiced efficiency. Commander Mars. Your registered Pokémon, authorized for temporary field access under League Emergency Order 7-14. Purigly, Bronzer, Galbat. Mars's hand trembled as she took the first Pokeball. She stared at it, just a sphere, just a device, just metal and light, and something in her face collapsed and rebuilt itself in the space of a breath. She pressed the release. Purigly materialized in a flash of light, massive, gray, luxuriously fat, with a tail that coiled like a spring and eyes that scanned the unfamiliar surroundings with immediate suspicion. The normal type's gaze swept the yard, the officers, the estate, dismissed all of it and locked onto Mars. The sound Purigly made wasn't a meow. It was a wail, a raw, keening cry of recognition that came from somewhere deeper than instinct. The cat Pokémon lunged forward and slammed into Mars with enough force to knock her back a step, pressing its massive body against her legs, rubbing its head against her stomach, purring so loudly the vibration was visible. Mars dropped to her knees. She wrapped her arms around Purigly's neck and buried her face in the thick gray fur and made a sound that Ash had never heard from her, a sob of pure, uncomplicated joy. "Hey," she whispered. "Hey, baby. I'm here. I'm here. I missed you. I missed you so much." Purigly's purring intensified until it sounded like a small engine. The cat climbed into Mars's lap, all 60 pounds of it, and refused to move. Ash looked away. The moment was too private, too holy, to observe. He found himself blinking hard and blamed the morning wind. Jupiter's reunion was different. When Skuntank appeared, the poison dark type didn't charge or wail. It stood very still, its red eyes fixed on Jupiter with an intensity that matched her own. They regarded each other across 5 feet of courtyard, trainer and Pokémon, 2 beings who communicated in silence and precision and the language of things unsaid. Jupiter knelt. Extended one hand. Skuntank walked forward slowly, deliberately, and pressed its forehead into her palm. Jupiter's eyes closed. Her other hand came up to rest on Skuntank's back, and she stayed like that, kneeling in the courtyard, eyes shut, connected, for a full minute. When she opened her eyes, they were bright, and the mask she wore had thinned to gossamer. "I kept my promise," she said to Skuntank, quietly enough that Ash barely heard. "I came back." Skuntank huffed. Its tail swished once. Jupiter's mouth curved into something that was unmistakably, undeniably a smile, small and fragile and devastating. Ash memorized it. He had a feeling he might need the memory of that smile to get through what was coming. Bronzer floated to Jupiter's side without fanfare, and her second Bronzer, the officer had brought 4 Pokeballs total for Jupiter, joined it. Galbat swooped in circles around Mars's head until she laughed and swatted at it. For 10 minutes, the courtyard was full of reunions, Pokémon and trainers rediscovering each other, relearning shapes and sounds and smells, rebuilding bonds that captivity had stretched but not broken. Mars's Purigly eventually deigned to acknowledge Ash's existence. The cat Pokémon looked at him with the imperial disdain that only felines could achieve, sniffed his hand, and then, to Mars's visible shock, bumped its head against his knee. "She doesn't do that," Mars said. She hates everyone. Maybe she's a good judge of character, Ash said. Mars stared at him. Then at Purugly. Then back at him. Her expression was complex and warm and terrified and something else, something she wasn't naming, wasn't ready to name, but couldn't hide anymore. Jupiter's Skuntank took one look at Pikachu, assessed the electric mouse's combat capability through some invisible Pokémon calculus, and nodded respectfully. Pikachu nodded back. Professional courtesy. All right, Ash said, when the reunions had settled. We've got 48 hours before the operation. Let's get to work. They trained together for the first time that afternoon, and it changed everything. Ash had seen Mars and Jupiter in combat before, on opposite sides, through the chaos of galactic confrontations, in the fragmented memories of battles fought at full speed. But he'd never worked with them, and the experience was a revelation. Mars fought the way she lived, aggressively, instinctively, with a raw power that compensated for strategic gaps through sheer ferocity. Purugly was her mirror, a deceptively fast brawler that hit harder than anything its size should have been able to hit. When Mars commanded, she didn't plan. She reacted, reading the battlefield in real time and making decisions that were sometimes brilliant and sometimes reckless and always committed. Jupiter was her opposite and her complement. She fought like she thought, precisely, systematically, 3 moves ahead. Skuntank and her Bronzer moved in formations she'd clearly drilled thousands of times, covering angles, controlling space, creating opportunities that Jupiter exploited with surgical efficiency. Where Mars was a bonfire, Jupiter was a scalpel. Together, they were terrifying. Ash ran combination drills, his team and theirs, working in concert. Infernape and Purugly as a frontline strike pair, fire and fury. Pikachu and Bronzer in a mid-range support configuration, electric attacks channeled through Bronzer's metallic body for amplified area coverage. Skuntank and Torterra anchoring the defensive line, poison and earth. The synergies emerged naturally. Mars's aggression pushed enemies into Jupiter's calculated kill zones. Jupiter's control created openings that Mars exploited before the opponent could recover. And Ash, instinctive, creative, the chaotic variable that no strategy could fully predict, tied them together, reading the flow of the combined force and making adjustments in real time that elevated the whole beyond the sum of its parts. By the end of the second day, they moved like a unit that had trained together for years, not hours. It shouldn't have been possible. It was. This is good, Mars said, breathing hard after a full team drill that had reduced the training arena to rubble. Purugly sat on the wreckage like a queen on a throne. This is really good. Jupiter consulted a notepad where she'd been tracking performance metrics. Our combined effectiveness is approximately 60% higher than individual operations. The complementary attack patterns between Infernape and Purugly alone, Jup. It's good. Just say it's good. Jupiter's pen paused. It's good. Ash grinned. It felt strange, grinning, on the eve of what might be the most dangerous operation of his life. But standing in his ruined training arena, surrounded by his Pokémon and their Pokémon and the 2 women who'd somehow become the center of his world, the grin felt right. The grin faded that evening. Cynthia's briefing was a cold shower. The latest satellite imagery of Spear Pillar showed Charon's construction in stark detail, a massive device built on the exact spot where Cyrus had summoned Dialga and Palkia, surrounded by a fortified perimeter of barricades and defensive positions. The amplifier was a skeletal tower of metal and cable and something that glowed with a light that the imaging software couldn't properly render, a color that didn't fit neatly into the visible spectrum. The null zones on the mountain have intensified, Cynthia reported. Our advanced scouts report areas where gravity fluctuates, time dilates, and spatial geometry becomes unreliable. Corridors that loop back on themselves. Distances that change depending on direction of travel. The mountain is becoming unstable. How many people are we bringing? Ash asked. Myself. You. Mars and Jupiter. A squad of 12 elite trainers from the League's Rapid Response Division. She paused. I've requested support from the gym leaders. Faulkner, Gardenia, Maylene, and Crasher Wake have agreed to join. Candace was willing, but I've assigned her to defend Snowpoint City in case the null zone spread further north. That was a serious force. Champions, gym leaders, elite trainers, the concentrated combat power of an entire region. It still might not be enough. There's one more thing, Cynthia said. Sharon has broadcast a message. She played it. Karen's voice filled the study, smooth, measured, cultured, the voice of a man who discussed apocalypse with the same tone he'd used to order lunch. To the Sinnoh League and its esteemed council. I am writing to inform you that the Spear Pillar Dimensional Amplifier will achieve full operational status in 24 hours. Upon activation, the device will establish a stable conduit between our reality and what I have termed the substrate, the foundational layer of existence that underlies spacetime itself. The energy available through this conduit is, for all practical purposes, infinite. I intend to harness it. Those who wish to oppose this should consider that I am offering the human race access to power that dwarfs anything Arceus saw fit to grant us. I am not destroying the world. I am upgrading it. Resistance, while anticipated, is inadvisable. Sharon out. The recording ended. The study was silent. He's insane, Mars said flatly. He's brilliant and insane, Jupiter corrected. Which is considerably worse. The substrate energy, Ash said. You told me it would widen the fractures. Connect them. If Sharon activates that amplifier at full power, every null zone in Sinnoh will expand exponentially. They'll merge. The dimensional barrier will fail across the entire region. Jupiter's voice was clinical, but her hands gripped the edge of the desk. And whatever is on the other side, the entity I've been calling the substrate presence, will have an open door. The thing we felt in the sub-basement, Mars said. The nothing. Yes. Ash looked at Cynthia's face on the screen. The champion of Sinnoh, the woman who'd faced down Dialga and Palkia, who'd battled gods and held the line, looked afraid. We launch at dawn, Cynthia said. Get sleep. You'll need it. Nobody slept. The council convened an emergency session at midnight. Ash attended by video link, expecting logistical updates. He got Halvard. The silver-haired councilman's face appeared on the split screen alongside the other council members, and his expression was the cold satisfaction of a man who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Before we discuss the military operation, Halvard said, I want to address the matter of the Galactic Commander's Pokémon access. Emergency Order 7-14 was issued by Champion Cynthia under her executive authority. I am formally challenging that order. Ash's blood went cold. On what grounds? Cynthia asked. On the grounds that arming convicted criminals on the eve of a confrontation with their former organization constitutes an unacceptable security risk. Mars and Jupiter are former galactic commanders. Sharon is a former galactic scientist. The possibility of collusion, Halvard, this is insane. Yara's voice cut in. We're facing a potential extinction-level event. We need every capable fighter we can get. We need fighters we can trust. And I do not trust, I do. Ash's voice silenced the chamber. Not because it was loud. Because it was absolute. I trust Mars and Jupiter with my life. Not as a theory. Not as an ideal. As a fact. I have lived with them for over a month. I have watched them choose, of their own free will, to stay when they were offered the chance to leave. I have watched them provide intelligence that our own investigators missed. I have watched them train alongside my Pokémon to defend a region that owes them nothing. He stood up from his desk. Pikachu's cheeks crackled at his shoulder. Councilman Halvard. You have opposed the rehabilitation program from the start. You sent an operative to steal files from my home. You have used every political tool at your disposal to undermine an initiative that the Council voted to support. And now, on the eve of a crisis that threatens every living thing in Sinnoh, you want to strip away two of our most valuable assets because you can't see past your own prejudice. The chamber was still. I am the League champion, Ash said. And I am telling this council, formally and for the record, that Mars and Jupiter will fight alongside me at Spear Pillar. If anyone wants to stop that, they can challenge me for the title. Right now. Otherwise, this discussion is over. Nobody spoke for 10 seconds. 20. 30. Halvard's jaw worked. His allies looked at the table. Yara was openly grinning. The motion is withdrawn, Halvard said, and his voice was ice. But I want it noted that I object. Noted, Cynthia said, in that same tone as before. We launch at 0500. Dismissed. The screens went dark. Ash sat down heavily. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of facing down a room of politicians with nothing but conviction and stubbornness. He became aware that he wasn't alone. Mars and Jupiter stood in the study doorway. They'd heard everything. Mars's eyes were bright, her mouth pressed into a tight line that was holding back something enormous. Jupiter's hand was on the doorframe, gripping it, her composure fracturing along lines that had become familiar over the weeks, the hairline cracks that let the real Jupiter show through. You just bet your career on us, Jupiter said. Yeah. That was strategically inadvisable. Probably. It was also, her voice caught. She cleared her throat. It was the most courageous thing I've ever witnessed. And I watched Cyrus try to remake reality. Mars crossed the room in 3 strides. She grabbed Ash by the front of his jacket, and for one electric second he thought she was going to hit him. Instead, she pressed her forehead against his, hard, fierce, her breath hot on his face. You impossible idiot, she whispered. When this is over, you and I are going to have a conversation. About what? About why my heart does stupid things when you talk like that. She let go of his jacket and walked out. Her footsteps were unsteady. Purigly followed her, tail swishing. Jupiter remained. She looked at Ash with an expression that held multitudes, gratitude, admiration, something deeper and warmer that she was only beginning to let herself feel. Get some rest, she said softly. Tomorrow will be difficult. Jupiter. Yes. We're going to make it through this. All of us. She held his gaze. Then, for the second time, she smiled, small, real, luminous. I believe you, she said. Against my better judgment, I believe you. She left. Ash sat in the study with Pikachu, listening to the house settle around him, and thought about the morning. Dawn broke bloody red over empty Coronet. The strike force assembled at the mountain's base camp, a hastily erected staging area on Route 207 that bristled with League equipment, medical stations, and the nervous energy of people who knew they were walking into something unprecedented. Ash arrived with Mars and Jupiter. The reaction from the assembled force was immediate and divided. The gym leaders, Faulkner with his electric confidence, Gardenia's quiet determination, Maylene's coiled intensity, Crasher Wake's booming presence, assessed the 2 former commanders with the practiced eyes of fighters measuring potential allies. The elite trainers were less generous. Whispers, glances, hands drifting toward pokeballs. Cynthia shut it down with a look. They're with us. Anyone who has a problem with that can stay at base camp. Nobody stayed. The ascent began at 0530. 3 teams, Cynthia leading the primary assault force up the main path, Faulkner and Gardenia taking a flanking route through the eastern caves, and Ash's team, himself, Mars, Jupiter, Maylene, and Crasher Wake, pushing through the western approach to hit Karen's perimeter from the blind side. The mountain was wrong. Ash felt it within the first 100 meters. The air was too thick, too still, charged with a static that made Pikachu's fur stand on end. The rock underfoot vibrated with a frequency just below hearing, a subsonic hum that settled into the bones and stayed there. And then they hit the first null zone. It manifested as a shimmer in the air, like heat haze, but cold. When Ash's team walked into it, the change was instantaneous. Pikachu's cheeks sputtered, the electricity flickering, dimming, like a candle in a wind that shouldn't exist. Maylene's Lucario stumbled, its aura sense disrupted. Mars's Golbat shrieked and wheeled, its echolocation returning garbled signals. "Keep moving," Ash said. "Stay together. Pokémon outside their balls, nobody stores anything from here on." They pushed through. The null zone lasted 30 meters, then faded, and the world normalized with a gasp like breaking surface after a dive. Pikachu's sparks returned, bright and angry. But there were more ahead. Ash could see them, shimmering patches of wrong air scattered up the mountainside like holes in a fabric. Some small enough to step around. Others stretching across the entire path, unavoidable. "The concentration increases the higher we go," Jupiter said, consulting a portable scanner that flickered unreliably. "Near the summit, they may be continuous. Then we fight without abilities if we have to," Mars said. Her hand rested on Purigli's back, the cat Pokémon pressed against her leg. Purigli's claws don't need electricity to cut. They climbed. The path narrowed, winding through stone corridors carved by ancient water and ancient power. The walls bore scars, not natural erosion, but the marks of the spear pillar event. Cracks in the rock that glowed faintly with a light that had no source. Places where the stone had melted and reformed in shapes that hurt to look at directly. The first Galactic patrol found them at the halfway point. 6 operatives in dark uniforms, armed with Pokémon that had been enhanced. Ash could see it in the way they moved, too fast, too strong, their eyes glazed with a chemical shine that spoke to Karen's experimentation. Toxicroak, Skuntank, Golbat, augmented versions of familiar species, pushed beyond their natural limits. Contact. Crasher Wake bellowed, and the battle erupted. In the confined space of the mountain corridor, it was brutal. No room for strategy, no room for finesse, just close-range combat in near darkness. Crasher Wake's Floatzel hit the lead Toxicroak with an aqua jet that sent both Pokémon careening off the walls. Maylene's Lucario engaged 2 opponents simultaneously, aura sphere flashing in the dark. Mars didn't wait for orders. She moved forward with Purigly like a 2-person wrecking crew, the cat Pokémon tearing through a Golbat while Mars herself disarmed a grunt with a combat technique so fast that Ash only saw the result, the operative on the ground, weaponless, gasping. Jupiter hung back, directing. Her voice was calm and precise over the chaos. "Bronzer, reflect on the left flank. Skuntank, toxic, the Toxicroak on the right is the priority target." Skuntank's poison caught the augmented Toxicroak mid-charge, and the fighting poison type stumbled, its enhanced metabolism accelerating the toxin's effect. It dropped in seconds. Ash and Pikachu cleaned up. Iron Tail took the last standing Pokémon, a Skuntank that was not Jupiter's, across the jaw, and it folded. The corridor went quiet. 6 grunts, disarmed and restrained. 30 seconds. Clean. Maylene looked at Mars and Jupiter with new eyes. "You two are efficient," Jupiter supplied. "I was going to say scary." "That too," Mars said, grinning. They pressed on. The battles intensified as they climbed. Sharon had seeded the mountain with patrols, traps, and automated defense systems that hummed with the same wrong light as the amplifier. Jupiter dismantled 3 traps before they could trigger, her knowledge of galactic technology turning each obstacle into a solved equation. Mars fought through 2 more patrol encounters with a ferocity that drew concerned looks from Crasher Wake and respectful ones from Maylene. Ash felt the rhythm of their combined force. The way Mars's aggression created openings, Jupiter's intelligence exploited them, and his own instincts tied everything together. They were a machine, but not a cold one. A living one, powered by trust and shared purpose in something that was still too new to name. 2 hours in. The path split. Cynthia's voice crackled over the communicator, fragmented by interference: primary team engaging, main gate, heavy resistance, western approach, still clear. She's drawing their attention, Jupiter said. The frontal assault is a diversion. We're the real thrust. Then we move fast, Ash said. They moved fast. The null zones grew denser. By the time they reached the upper slopes, the shimmering patches had merged into a near-continuous field of wrongness. Pokémon moves flickered and faded. Pikachu's electricity came in bursts, strong for a moment, then guttering, then strong again, unpredictable. Purugly's attacks lost their edge. Bronzer's psychic abilities stuttered. But they adapted. Mars switched Purugly to pure physical attacks, no moves, just claws and weight and speed. Jupiter's Skuntank relied on its natural poison rather than trained techniques. Ash let Pikachu fight on instinct, the electric mouse's natural combat sense compensating for the unreliable power. They crested the final ridge, and Spear Pillar opened before them. It was worse than Ash remembered. The ancient platform, the sacred summit where Arceus had shaped the world, where Cyrus had torn it apart, was barely recognizable. Charon's amplifier dominated the center, a tower of black metal and crystalline conduits that rose 30 feet into the sky, surrounded by a web of cables and monitoring equipment. The tower pulsed with that wrong light, the color that didn't belong, the shade that existed between ultraviolet and something that human eyes weren't built to perceive. And at the base of the tower, the air was torn. Not metaphorically. The dimensional barrier was visibly damaged, a ragged wound in reality that hung in the air like a vertical scar. Through it, Ash could see nothing. Not darkness. Not void. The complete absence of anything. It pulled at his eyes, tried to draw his gaze into it, and somewhere in the back of his mind, something primitive and ancient screamed, "Don't look, don't look, don't look." Sharon stood at the amplifier's control console, flanked by his remaining operatives, 20 or so, arrayed in defensive positions around the platform. The old scientist was dressed immaculately, as always, his lab coat pristine, his glasses reflecting the wrong light. And between them and Sharon, blocking the approach to the amplifier, stood Saturn. The blue-haired commander stood alone in the center of the path, 4 pokeballs on his belt, his face a battlefield of conflicting loyalties. He saw them, saw Mars and Jupiter, saw Ash, saw the force arrayed behind them, and his hand went to his lead pokeball. "Saturn," Mars said. Her voice held everything: anger, sadness, betrayal, the remnants of a bond that neither time nor circumstance had fully severed. "I can't let you through," Saturn said. His voice was rough. Tired. "Not yet. You came to us," Jupiter said. "You warned us about Sharon. You told us to be careful. And now you're standing in our way. Because someone has to." Saturn's eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. "Sharon is wrong, I know that now. I've seen what the amplifier does. I've seen the null zones, the reality degradation, he swallowed. But if I just step aside, if I just let you through, then everything I believed was nothing. Every sacrifice, every mission, every person his voice broke. I need to know if what Cyrus built meant something. Even if it meant the wrong thing. I need to know it mattered." Ash understood. In that moment, standing on the broken summit of the world with the wind tearing at his jacket and the void gaping behind Saturn's shoulder, he understood exactly what Saturn was feeling. The desperate need for meaning. The terror of discovering that your entire life had been built on a lie. He stepped forward. Past Mars, who reached for him and missed. Past Jupiter, whose eyes widened. Past Maylene and Crasher Wake, who tensed. He walked toward Saturn alone. "It mattered," Ash said. Saturn's hand tightened on his pokeball. "Don't patronize me. I'm not. It mattered. Everything you did, The missions, the sacrifices, the choices, it all mattered. Not because Cyrus was right. He wasn't. But because you believed in something bigger than yourself, and you committed to it completely, and that takes a kind of courage that most people never find. Courage? Saturn laughed bitterly. I helped a madman try to destroy the world. And now you're standing on a mountain trying to figure out what comes next. That's the hardest part, Saturn. Not the fighting. Not the missions. The part where you have to look at what you've done and decide who you want to be going forward. Saturn stared at him. Behind him, the amplifier pulsed. The tear in reality shuddered, widening incrementally, a fraction of an inch, barely perceptible, but Ash felt it in his bones. Mars and Jupiter made that choice, Ash said. It wasn't easy. It isn't easy. They're still making it every day. But they're making it. And you can too. Saturn's hand was shaking on the pokeball. His jaw was clenched so tight the muscles stood out like cords. Mars's voice came from behind Ash, quiet and raw, Saturn. Please. Come home. Home. The word hit Saturn like a physical blow. His eyes squeezed shut. His hand dropped from the pokeball. I don't have a home, he whispered. Yeah, you do, Mars said. You idiot. You always did. Saturn opened his eyes. Looked at Mars. At Jupiter. At Ash. At the boy who'd beaten gods and legendaries and somehow found it in himself to stand unarmed in front of a man with 4 Pokemon and offer him something no one else ever had. A choice. Saturn stepped aside. Then he turned around and stood beside them, facing the amplifier, facing Sharon, facing the void. Let's end this, he said. Sharon had watched the entire exchange from his console. When they advanced, all of them, 6 trainers and their Pokemon, a wall of determination and power, he didn't look surprised. He looked amused. Saturn, Sharon called across the platform, his voice carrying with the clarity of a man accustomed to lecturing. I'm disappointed. Though not, I confess, surprised. You always were the sentimental one. And you always were the sociopath, Saturn replied. At least I've changed. Change is overrated. Optimization is what matters. Sharon adjusted his glasses and tapped a sequence into the console. The amplifier's hum deepened, shifted from background noise to a vibration that could be felt through the stone. You're too late, incidentally. The amplifier has entered its activation sequence. In approximately 12 minutes, it will reach full power and establish a permanent conduit to the substrate. The process is automated and irreversible. Then we'll destroy it, Ash said. You're welcome to try. But I should mention, Sharon gestured at the tear in reality behind him. The wound had widened visibly in the last few minutes, its edges flickering with that wrong light. The amplifier is drawing power from the substrate in real time. The closer it gets to full activation, the more energy flows through. If you damage the amplifier while it's channeling that energy, the resulting feedback could tear the dimensional barrier open in an uncontrolled cascade. He smiled. You could destroy my machine. You'd also destroy Sinnoh. Silence. So what do we do? Maylene asked, her fists clenched. Jupiter's mind was already working. Ash could see it, the rapid-fire calculation behind her eyes, the strategist assembling and discarding scenarios at blinding speed. He's lying, Jupiter said. Partially. A feedback cascade is possible, but only if the amplifier is destroyed while at full power. If we can shut it down before it reaches full activation, interrupt the power cycle, the energy dissipates harmlessly. 12 minutes, Ash said. Less now. 10, maybe. What do you need? Access to the console. 3 minutes of uninterrupted work. I designed the base architecture of Galactic's dimensional technology. I can reverse engineer the shutdown sequence. She met his eyes. But I need you to keep Sharon and his forces away from me while I work. Ash looked at the platform. 20 galactic operatives in defensive positions. Sharon himself, who, now that Ash looked closely, was surrounded by a faint shimmer of dimensional energy, his body slightly off, as if he wasn't entirely occupying the same space as everything else. Enhanced. Augmented. The old scientist had been experimenting on himself. 10 minutes. 20 opponents. A partially phased mad scientist. And the fate of a region. Ash grinned. Mars. You're with me on the front line. We punched through to the console. Mars cracked her knuckles. Purigli's claws extended. Finally. Saturn, Maylene, Crasher Wake, hold the flanks. Keep the grunts off us. Done, Crasher Wake rumbled, and his floatzel bared its teeth. Jupiter, stay behind our line until we reach the console. Then do your thing. Jupiter nodded. Her Skuntank and Bronzer flanked her, a personal guard detail. Her face was calm, focused, the strategist in her element. Go, Ash said. They went. The assault on Karen's defensive line was a controlled hurricane. Ash and Mars hit the center like a battering ram, Infernape and Purigly leading the charge, Fire and Fury tearing through the first rank of galactic operatives before they could mount a coordinated response. Pikachu ran interference, darting between enemy Pokémon with iron tail flashing, disrupting formations, creating chaos. Crasher Wake took the right flank with the subtlety of a tidal wave. His Floatzel and Quagsire carved through defenders with Aqua Jet and Earthquake, the big man laughing, actually laughing, as he fought, his voice booming across the summit like thunder. Maylene mirrored him on the left, her Lucario and Metacam dismantling the galactic line with surgical precision, close combat and high jump kick dropping augmented Pokémon with a clinical efficiency that belied her youth. Saturn fought in the gaps between, plugging holes, supporting both flanks, his Toxicroak and Alakazam working in a tandem that spoke to years of partnership. He fought with the desperate energy of a man trying to atone for everything in a single moment. And through the center, behind the spearhead of Ash and Mars, Jupiter advanced. Sharon didn't wait for them to reach him. He raised one hand, the shimmer around his body intensified, the dimensional energy flowing through him visible now, crackling across his skin like lightning, and unleashed an attack that wasn't a Pokémon move. It was a wave. A pulse of null force that rippled outward from his palm, and where it passed, reality stuttered. Pokémon moves fizzled. Pikachu's Thunderbolt died mid-arc, Infernape's flames guttered. For one terrifying second, everything stopped working. Mars's Purigly, mid-leap, faltered, its muscles seizing as the null wave hit, and it crashed to the ground in a graceless heap. Mars was beside it instantly, hands on the cat's body, checking. She's okay, Mars said. Stunned, not hurt. But that wave, he can project null zones, Jupiter said from behind them, her voice tight. He's turned himself into a walking dead zone. As long as he's channeling, our Pokémon will be compromised near him. Then we fight without Pokémon near him, Ash said. He looked at Mars. You said you were Galactic's top-rated hand-to-hand fighter. Mars's eyes widened. Then narrowed. Then blazed. Oh, you beautiful maniac, she said. They charged. Karen's eyes widened behind his glasses, he hadn't expected a physical assault. He raised his hand for another null wave, but Mars was already inside his range, moving with the combat-trained speed she drilled in Ash's arena for weeks. She hit him with a spinning kick that connected with his wrist and knocked his arm aside, disrupting the wave before it could form. Ash was right behind her. He wasn't trained, not like Mars, but he was fast and fearless and had spent years dodging attacks from creatures that could level buildings. He tackled Sharon around the midsection, and the old scientist went down, the dimensional shimmer around his body crackling and popping as the physical contact disrupted his concentration. They grappled on the ancient stone of Spear Pillar, two teenagers and a genius who tried to become a god. Sharon was stronger than he looked, the dimensional energy augmented his body, his limbs moving with a speed that didn't match his age. He threw Ash off with a surge of null force that sent the trainer skidding across the platform, and rose to face Mars with energy crackling around his fists. "Commander Mars," Sharon said, and his voice was cold with contempt. "Still fighting other people's battles. You haven't changed at all." "You're wrong," Mars said, and hit him in the face. The blow staggered him. Mars followed up, kick to the knee, elbow to the solar plexus, a combination she drilled until it was muscle memory. Sharon absorbed the first 2 strikes, blocked the third, and discharged a point-blank null pulse that caught Mars in the chest and sent her flying backward. She hit the ground hard. The breath went out of her. The world went gray at the edges. Mars. Ash scrambled to his feet. Pikachu was beside him, sparking, but the null field around Sharon rendered the electricity useless. Ash's hand went to his belt, to Infernape's Pokeball, but they were still in the null zone. Sharon stepped toward Mars, energy building in his palm. "You chose the wrong side, Commander. You always were emotional. Cyrus valued that fire. I don't." Ash moved. He didn't think. Thought was too slow. He moved on the same instinct that had carried him through 6 regions and 100 battles and 1 impossible league victory, the bone-deep reflex that said protect the people who matter. He put himself between Sharon and Mars. The null pulse hit him square in the chest. It was like being erased. Not pain, something worse than pain. The sensation of parts of himself flickering out, his thoughts going blank in patches, his vision cutting to static. He felt the nothing, the same nothing he'd felt in the sub-basement, the same nothing that pressed against reality from the other side, and it reached into him and tried to unmake something fundamental. He stayed standing. He didn't know how. His legs should have buckled. His consciousness should have failed. But something in him, something stubborn and fierce and absolutely unwilling to fall when someone behind him needed protecting, held. Sharon stared at him. For the first time, the scientist's composure cracked. "That's not possible. The null force disrupts neural function. You should be what?" Ash's voice was ragged. His body was screaming. But his eyes were clear. "Unconscious. Erased. I've been hit by a legendary Pokemon's strongest attack and gotten back up. You think your science experiment is going to keep me down?" Behind him, Mars was struggling to her feet. She'd seen it, seen Ash throw himself between her and the blast, seen him take the hit that was meant for her, seen him stay standing. Her eyes were wide and bright and something in them shattered and reformed into a new shape, a shape that had a name she was finally ready to say. "Ash," she started. "Get Jupiter to the console," Ash said, not looking back. "I'll handle Sharon." "You can't, he's augmented, your Pokemon don't work near him, I know." He raised his fists. They were shaking. He wasn't. "Go." Mars went. Not because she wanted to, every fiber of her being screamed to stay, to fight beside him, to protect this impossible boy the way he protected her. But she was a soldier, and she understood tactical priorities, and the mission was bigger than her heart. She grabbed Jupiter by the arm. "Console. Now. I'll cover you." Jupiter didn't need to be told twice. She sprinted for the amplifier's control interface, Skuntank running beside her, while Mars and Purugly carved a path through the remaining galactic operatives with a ferocity that bordered on transcendent. On the platform, Ash faced Sharon. The old scientist straightened his glasses. The dimensional energy flowed around him, a corona of wrong light. "You're brave, champion. Foolish, but brave. Cyrus would have appreciated you, in his way. I don't need appreciation from people who try to destroy the world." Destroy? No. Transcend. The substrate is the foundation of everything. Arceus shaped reality from it. Dialga and Palkia draw their power from it. And when I open the conduit, I will draw from it too, not as a god, but as an engineer. I will rebuild this broken world from the ground up. And how many people die in the rebuilding? Sharon smiled. It was the smile of a man who'd done the math and found the casualties acceptable. Progress requires sacrifice. Surely you of all people understand that. No, Ash said. I don't. He attacked. Not with strategy, he didn't have one. Not with technique, Mars had said his footwork needed complete reconstruction. He attacked with everything he was, a boy from Pallet Town who'd walked into the unknown at age 10 and never stopped walking, who'd faced down gods and legendaries and his own limitations and come out the other side with nothing but stubbornness and love. Sharon was faster. Stronger. Enhanced beyond human limits. His no pulses kept Ash's Pokémon at bay, and his augmented reflexes made him a dangerous fighter even without them. He blocked Ash's first punch, dodged the second, and landed a palm strike to Ash's shoulder that sent crackling null energy through the trainer's body. Ash gasped. Stumbled. Kept fighting. He landed a hit, a wild swing that caught Sharon across the jaw and snapped his glasses off his face. The scientist staggered, more from surprise than pain, and Ash followed up with a kick that Mars would have been proud of, catching Sharon in the hip and spinning him sideways. But Sharon was learning. He caught Ash's next strike, twisted, and threw the trainer with a hip toss augmented by dimensional energy. Ash hit the stone hard. Rolled. Came up bloody from a cut on his forehead. Admirable, Sharon said, wiping his lip. But ultimately pointless. The amplifier reaches full power in 4 minutes. Your strategist won't crack the shutdown in time. At the console, Jupiter's fingers flew. Screens scrolled. Code cascaded. She was deep in the architecture now, the familiar bones of a system she'd helped design, twisted and expanded by Karen's genius into something nearly unrecognizable. But nearly wasn't completely, and Jupiter's mind was a weapon that no null field could disrupt. 3 minutes, she muttered. I need 3 minutes. You've got it, Mars said, standing between Jupiter and the remaining galactic operatives, Purugly at her side, both of them battered and bleeding and absolutely immovable. Saturn had joined her, his Toxicroak forming a second line of defense, and together they held the perimeter with the grim efficiency of people who knew exactly how to fight dirty. Ash bought time the only way he knew how, by refusing to go down. Sharon hit him again. And again. Null pulses and augmented strikes that would have dropped any normal person. Ash felt each one, felt the nothing creeping in at the edges, felt pieces of himself flickering, and got back up. Every time. Not because he was strong enough. Because giving up wasn't something his body knew how to do. Pikachu screamed from outside the null zone, unable to reach his trainer, sparking with desperate fury. Infernape roared, flames reaching for Sharon but dying before they could connect. The Pokémon raged against the invisible wall that separated them from the person they loved most, and the sound of their helpless anger was the worst thing Ash had ever heard. Stay back. Ash shouted at them. I've got this. He didn't have this. He was on his knees, blood in his eyes, his body failing. Sharon stood over him, dimensional energy building for a final pulse, one strong enough to erase, not stun. Goodbye, champion, Sharon said. The null field collapsed. It happened between one heartbeat and the next, a ripple ran through the ambient null energy, and it shattered, not weakened, not faded, but broke apart like glass. Sharon stumbled, his augmentation flickering, his enhanced speed and strength guttering. At the console, Jupiter straightened. Her face was triumphant and exhausted and fierce. I didn't just shut down the amplifier's power cycle, she said. I reversed the polarity of the dimensional conduit. Instead of pulling substrate energy in, it's now pushing it back. Including, she looked at Sharon. Including the energy you augmented yourself with. Sharon looked at his hands. The shimmer was fading, the wrong light dying, the dimensional energy being sucked back through the conduit like water down a drain. His augmentation was draining with it. He was becoming, rapidly, exactly what he'd always been, a brilliant old man with no special powers. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." Pikachu hit him with the full force of a thunderbolt that had been building for 10 minutes. Every volt, every amp, channeled through weeks of frustration and the desperate love of a Pokémon who just watched his trainer get beaten bloody. Sharon didn't scream. He simply crumpled, like a puppet with cut strings, and lay still on the ancient stone. Ash stayed on his knees. The blood from his forehead was dripping onto the platform. His vision swam. His body was a constellation of pain. Mars was there. She was beside him before he registered her movement, her hands on his shoulders, his face, checking injuries with the frantic efficiency of someone who was trying very hard not to fall apart. "You're okay," she said. "You're okay, look at me." He looked at her. Her face was dirty and bruised and streaked with tears. She hadn't noticed she was crying, and she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "Hey," he said stupidly. "Don't hey me, you absolute, you could have died." He was going to, but he didn't. "Because Jupiter, but you didn't know she'd, you just stood there and took it, had to. You were behind me." Mars's hands tightened on his shoulders. Her breath hitched. Her eyes searched his face with an intensity that burned brighter than any fire. "Why?" she asked. And her voice cracked on the word, broke it open, let everything underneath come flooding out. "Why would you do that for me?" Ash looked at her. His head was ringing, his body was wrecked, the world might still be ending, and none of it mattered because Mars was looking at him like he was the only real thing in the universe. "I think you know why," he said. Mars made a sound, half laugh, half sob, and kissed him. It was not graceful. It was not gentle. It was desperate and fierce and tasted like blood and tears and the clean cold air of a mountain summit, and it was the most honest thing either of them had ever done. Mars kissed him like she was trying to press the feeling through his skin and into his bones, like she could make him understand through contact what she couldn't say with words. He kissed her back. His hands found her waist, pulled her close, and for one perfect moment the world contracted to a single point of warmth in an ocean of nothing. She pulled back. Pressed her forehead against his. Her eyes were wet and furious and incandescent. "Don't you ever scare me like that again," she whispered. "Can't promise that." "I know. Idiot." Behind them, the amplifier groaned. The sound brought them back to reality, back to the mountain, the mission, the tear in the dimensional barrier that was still very much open. Jupiter was at the console, working feverishly. Her reversal had drained Karen's augmentation and interrupted the power cycle, but the amplifier's structural damage was done. The conduit was unstable, not widening anymore, but not closing either. A wound that had been ripped open and left to bleed. "The amplifier is offline," Jupiter reported, her voice strained with effort. "But the dimensional tear is self-sustaining. The fractures across Sinnoh are feeding it, every null zone, every crack, is channeling energy to this point. It's like a watershed. Everything flows here. Can you close it?" Ash asked, Mars helping him to his feet. "Not with this equipment. The tear is too large and too stable. It would take an energy source comparable to the one that created it. Dialga and Palkia? They could close it. But summoning them would require." She stopped. Turned. Looked past the platform, past the mountains, toward the 3 lakes that she couldn't see but could feel, 3 points of ancient power, equidistant around Sinnoh, pulsing with distress. "The Lake Guardians," she said. As if in answer, the air shimmered. 3 points of light appeared above the platform, small, brilliant, humming with psychic energy. Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf materialized in a triangle formation above the tear, their forms tiny against the enormity of the void, but their presence immense. The weight of knowledge, emotion, and willpower pressed down on the summit like a physical force. But the tear didn't close. The lake guardians strained against it, their psychic power pushing against the wound in reality, but the fracture was too deep, the substrate's pressure too great. For every inch they sealed, the void pushed back too. "They're not strong enough," Jupiter said, and for the first time, her voice held despair. "The tear requires more energy than the three of them can generate." Ash looked at the tear. At the void beyond it, the nothing, the absence, the thing that had pressed against him in the sub-basement and on the platform and was now pushing through with growing force. He could feel it, a cold that wasn't cold, a darkness that wasn't dark, the unmistakable presence of something that existed by not existing. Erebus. Jupiter's name for it. Not a being. Not a force. A condition, the state of things in the space between realities, the raw unbeing that underlay the structure of the universe. It wasn't evil. It was simply incompatible with existence, the way water was incompatible with fire. If it came through, it wouldn't destroy the world. It would unmake it. Every atom, every thought, every moment of joy and pain and love, dissolved back into the nothing from which Arceus had shaped them. Ash looked at Pikachu. The electric mouse was at his feet, battered, exhausted, but staring up at him with absolute trust. "Ready. As always, ready." "Pikachu," Ash said. "Remember the blizzard?" Pikachu's ears perked. His cheeks sparked, weakly, painfully, but sparked. "I need you to do something similar. But bigger. A lot bigger." He turned to Mars and Jupiter. To Saturn, Maylene, Crasher Wake, all of them gathered on the platform, their Pokémon at their sides, watching him with the desperate hope of people who needed someone to have an answer. "The Lake Guardians need more power. We're going to give it to them. Every Pokémon, every trainer, everything we've got, channeled through Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf. If we can boost their output enough to overcome the substrate's pressure, even for a moment, they can seal the tear." "That's insane," Saturn said. "That's Ash," Mars said. Jupiter ran the numbers. Her lips moved silently, calculations cascading behind her eyes. After 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours, she looked up. It could work. The Lake Guardians are conduits, they can absorb and channel external energy. If every Pokémon on this platform contributes their maximum output simultaneously, the combined force might be sufficient. "Might?" Crasher Wake asked. "It's the best odds we're going to get," Jupiter said. Ash didn't wait for debate. "Everyone. Every Pokémon, every move, everything you've got. Hit the Lake Guardians with everything." They responded. Not because he had authority. Not because he had a title. Because he was Ash Ketchum, standing bloody and beaten on a mountaintop, asking people to trust him one more time, and every single person on that platform trusted him. Mars's Purugly unleashed a hyper beam, raw, unfiltered energy, the cat Pokémon's body glowing with the effort. Jupiter's Skuntank added flamethrower, its fire burning hot and clean. Saturn's Toxicroak channeled Focus Blast. Maylene's Lucario unleashed Aura Sphere, not one, but a continuous stream, the fighting type pouring its life force into the attack. Crasher Wake's Floatzel fired Hydro Pump with everything it had. And Pikachu. Pikachu climbed onto Ash's shoulder. Pressed his body against his trainer's neck. Drew on every volt he'd ever generated, every spark he'd ever thrown, every battle he'd ever fought and won. The electricity built, not in his cheeks, but in his heart, in the bond between trainer and Pokémon that had been forged over years of shared joy and shared pain and shared life. The thunderbolt that erupted from Pikachu was not yellow. It was white. Pure, blinding, nuclear bright, a bolt of lightning that dwarfed anything Ash had ever seen, carrying with it the accumulated power of every moment they'd shared since a stubborn 10-year-old and an angry Pikachu had walked out of Pallet Town together. It hit the Lake Guardians. All of it hit the Lake Guardians, the combined output of every Pokémon on the platform, a torrent of energy so vast that the stone beneath their feet cracked from the backwash. Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf absorbed it, their tiny bodies blazing with light, and they turned that power on the tear. The void screamed. Not a sound. A sensation, the feeling of something vast and incomprehensible being pushed back against its will, the substrate recoiling from the concentrated force of a dozen Pokémon and the guardians of an entire region. The tear shuddered. Its edges flickered. The nothing beyond it surged forward one last time. Ash felt it press against the seal like an ocean against a dam, and then the lake guardians pushed, and the tear closed. Not slowly. Not gradually. It snapped shut like a wound being sutured by divine hands, the edges of reality knitting together in a cascade of light that washed across the summit and down the mountainside and across the entire region. The null zones, every one of them, from the caves of M. Coronet to the outskirts of Orberg, collapsed simultaneously, reality reasserting itself with a sound like a bell being struck. The world healed. On the platform, every Pokémon collapsed. Pikachu slid from Ash's shoulder, unconscious, his body still faintly glowing. Purigly lay on her side, breathing hard. Skuntank was down, Bronzer on the ground, Floatzel sprawled, Lucario flat on its back. The trainers weren't much better. Mars was on her knees, gasping. Jupiter sat down heavily, her legs finally failing. Crasher Wake actually fell backward, flat on his back, laughing breathlessly at the sky. Maylene sat cross-legged and stared at nothing, processing. Saturn stood alone, his Pokémon unconscious around him, tears running down his face. Above them, the lake guardians hovered for a moment, tiny, brilliant, exhausted, and then disappeared, returning to their lakes, their duty fulfilled. The sky over Spear Pillar was clear. The wind was clean. The stone beneath them was solid and real and undeniably, beautifully there. Ash held Pikachu against his chest and felt the electric mouse's heartbeat, steady, strong, alive, and for the first time since he'd won the Sinnoh League, the weight on his shoulders lifted. Cynthia's team reached the summit 20 minutes later. By then, Sharon was restrained with every binding the League had available, physical, electronic, psychic. He'd regained consciousness and was alternating between furious silence and bitter monologues about the potential they'd squandered. Infinite power, he spat as they loaded him into a reinforced transport. I offered you infinite power, and you threw it away for sentiment. Sentiment is the point, Ash said. Sharon stared at him. Something moved behind the old scientist's eyes, not understanding, not acceptance, but the beginning of a question he would spend years in prison trying to answer. The transport took him away. Ash watched it go and didn't feel triumph. He felt tired. He felt relieved. He felt the bruises on his body and the cut on his forehead and the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who'd run further than he knew he could. He felt Mars's hand on his arm, warm and steady. He felt Jupiter's presence at his shoulder, quiet and sure. Cynthia found him sitting on the ancient stones of Spear Pillar, flanked by two former Galactic commanders, watching the sunset paint the mountains in colors that were real and warm and right. You did it, Cynthia said. We did it, Ash corrected. Cynthia looked at Mars and Jupiter. At the Pokémon scattered across the platform, being treated by medics, recovering from the effort that had saved the world. At Saturn, sitting apart, head bowed, waiting for whatever came next. The council will want to debrief, Cynthia said. There will be hearings. Questions. Halvard will try to spin this. Let him try, Ash said. The words carried no bravado. Just certainty. Cynthia studied him for a long moment. Then she did something Ash had never seen her do, she laughed. Not her careful, political laugh. A real one, surprised and warm and full. You know, she said, when I brought you into that first council session, I thought I was investing in potential. I was wrong. You were already there. She walked away to coordinate the cleanup. Ash sat with Mars and Jupiter and watched the sky. So, Mars said eventually. Her voice was hoarse from shouting and fighting and crying. What now? Now we go home, Ash said. And then? And then we figure it out. Together. Mars leaned against his shoulder. It was the simplest gesture, no drama, no declaration, just the weight of her body against his, warm and present and chosen. She closed her eyes. Jupiter sat on his other side. She hadn't spoken since the platform, her energy spent in the frantic work at the console. But she was there, and she was close, and when Ash glanced at her, she was watching him with an expression that had shed every layer of defense she'd ever built. Not the strategist. Not the commander. Not the mask. Just Jupiter, tired, brilliant, wounded, healing, real. Ash held out his hand. Palm up. Open. Jupiter looked at it. At him. At Mars, dozing against his other shoulder. At the sunset, and the mountains, and the world they'd just saved. She took his hand. Her grip was careful, precise, even exhausted, even stripped bare. Jupiter did things with intention. Her fingers laced through his, and she held on with a quiet fierceness that said more than any speech she could have composed. Ash felt her pulse against his palm. Steady. Alive. He held on. Saturn turned himself in at the base camp. He walked up to the League officers, removed his pokeballs from his belt, and set them down on the processing table. My name is Saturn, he said. Former Commander, Team Galactic. I'm requesting entry into the Rehabilitation Through Service program. The officers looked at each other. Looked at Saturn. Looked at Ash, who was standing nearby, battered and bloody and absolutely certain. I'll vouch for him, Ash said. Champion Ketchum, the program requires, I'll vouch for him. The officers processed the paperwork. Saturn stood with his hands behind his back, military straight, and when they put the monitoring anklet on his leg, he looked at it with something that might have been relief. Mars punched him in the shoulder. Welcome to the club. The food is terrible and the champion is an idiot. I heard the food's gotten better, Saturn said. Don't push it. Jupiter shook Saturn's hand, formal, correct, and infinitely warmer than any handshake she'd ever given anyone. You'll need books. I'll arrange something. Thank you, Jup. Don't call me Jup. She lets Mars call her Jup, Ash said. Mars has earned it through sustained irritation over a period of years, Jupiter said. Saturn can work up to it. Saturn's mouth twitched. It was the closest thing to a smile Ash had seen from him. The council hearing happened 3 days later. Ash attended in person, standing before the horseshoe table with bandages still on his forehead and bruises still purpling his arms. Mars and Jupiter stood behind him, flanking, their postures straight and their faces composed. Halvard was conspicuously absent. His seat was empty. Yara, sitting in the chair beside his vacant one, wore a small, satisfied smile. Councilman Halvard has taken a leave of absence, Cynthia explained from the head of the table. Pending an internal review of certain, operational decisions. Ash didn't ask for details. He didn't need them. The hearing was brief. The evidence was overwhelming. Mars and Jupiter had provided critical intelligence, fought alongside League forces, and directly contributed to the neutralization of the substrate threat. Jupiter's work at the amplifier console had prevented a potential extinction event. Mars's combat actions had protected the strike team's flanks during the assault. The council voted unanimously to validate the Rehabilitation Through Service program. Mars and Jupiter's sentences were commuted to time served plus continued monitored reintegration. Their Pokemon access was made permanent. When the vote was announced, Mars didn't react visibly. She stood straight and still and said, "Thank you," in a voice that barely wavered. Jupiter said nothing. She blinked rapidly for several seconds, then clasped her hands behind her back and stared at the far wall with the concentrated focus of someone who was absolutely not crying. Pikachu, sitting on Ash's shoulder, chirped softly. His cheeks sparked, not in warning, not in threat. In warmth. In welcome. Outside the chamber, in the stone corridor where everything echoed, Mars grabbed Ash's hand and squeezed it so hard his knuckles ached. "Free," she said. The word sounded foreign in her mouth, a concept she'd never had the luxury of tasting before. "We're actually free." "Not free," Jupiter corrected, but gently. "Reintegrating. There are still conditions. Monitoring. Restrictions. Jup. We're free. Let me have this." Jupiter looked at her. At their hands, Mars is gripping Ash's, white-knuckled. At the light coming through the corridor windows, falling on all three of them in warm, golden bars. "We're free," Jupiter agreed. And her voice, for once, was not measured or careful or controlled. It was simply, quietly, devastatingly happy. They went home. The estate in Hearthome City looked different in the afternoon light, or maybe Ash was different. The building that had felt absurd and empty 6 weeks ago now felt like something worth protecting. Something worth coming back to. Purugly claimed the living room couch immediately and refused to move. Skuntank settled into the garden with Torterra, the two Pokémon establishing a companionable silence between them. Golbat hung from the arena rafters next to Glisker, and the two bat-like Pokémon regarded each other with mutual approval. Brock arrived that evening with enough groceries to feed an army. Dawn came with him, and when she saw Mars and Jupiter, saw the way they moved through the house, comfortable, belonging, their body language open in ways that had been unimaginable a month ago, she hugged them both. Mars was too surprised to resist. Jupiter was too exhausted to deflect. Dawn held on for longer than was probably socially acceptable and whispered something to each of them that made Mars's eyes go bright and Jupiter's posture soften. Brock cooked dinner. The whole house smelled like his curry, rich and warm and spiced in ways that made Mars audibly groan with anticipation. The kitchen table was full for the first time: Ash, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Dawn, Brock, Pikachu on the table stealing food, Purugly on Mars's lap pretending not to beg. They ate. They talked. Mars argued with Saturn about something from their galactic days and it turned into laughter instead of pain. Jupiter explained a passage from her book to Brock with an animation that would have been unrecognizable 6 weeks ago. Dawn told stories about her latest contest, and Ash listened, and laughed, and felt the warmth of the room settle into him like sunlight into stone. After dinner, when Brock and Dawn had gone and Saturn had retreated to the guest room Ash had prepared for him, the house settled into quiet. Ash stood in the kitchen, washing dishes because it was something to do with his hands. The window over the sink looked out at the garden, where Torterra and Skuntank were silhouetted against the stars. Mars appeared beside him. She picked up a towel and started drying without being asked. They worked in silence for a few minutes, the rhythm of washing and drying, the clink of plates, the running water. "So," Mars said. "About that kiss." Ash nearly dropped a plate. "Yeah. Was that a one-time crisis thing, or, it wasn't a one-time crisis thing?" Mars's drying slowed. Stopped. She held a plate in one hand and a towel in the other and stared at the counter with the focused intensity of someone working very hard not to look at the person beside her. "Good," she said. "Because I've been thinking about doing it again. Constantly. To the point where it's interfering with basic functions like eating and sleeping and," Ash kissed her. This time it was gentle. Not the desperate, adrenaline-fueled collision on Spear Pillar, but something softer, the press of his lips against hers, warm and careful, a question rather than a declaration. Mars made a small sound against his mouth and her hand came up to the back of his neck and pulled him closer, and the plate she'd been holding clattered into the sink. They stood in the kitchen, kissing, and it was clumsy and real and exactly right. When they parted, Mars's face was pink and her eyes were bright and she was smiling, really smiling, the full unguarded version that transformed her entire face from sharp-edged beauty into something luminous. "You're a terrible kisser," she said. "You kissed me first. On a mountain. Under duress. This one's on you." "Was it bad?" "It was," she bit her lip. The smile widened. Acceptable. With practice, you might improve. How much practice? Extensive. Ongoing. Possibly lifelong. Ash laughed. Mars laughed. And in the kitchen doorway, a shadow moved, Jupiter, who had come to say goodnight and stopped, one hand on the frame, watching the scene with an expression that held joy and ache in equal measure. Joy, because Mars deserved this. Because Ash deserved this. Because they were good together, fire and instinct, chaos and warmth. Ache, because Jupiter wanted something she didn't know how to ask for, something she wasn't sure she was allowed to have. She turned to go. Quiet. Practiced. The ghost of a woman who'd spent her life making sure her presence was felt only when she wanted it to be. Jupiter. Ash's voice. She stopped. Didn't turn. Don't go. She stood in the doorway, her back to them, every defense she'd ever built screaming at her to walk away, to retreat, to protect the fragile thing inside her that Ash had spent weeks coaxing to life. I don't want to intrude, she said, and her voice was perfectly steady and completely transparent. You're not intruding. Ash's hand touched her shoulder. She flinched, that old reflex, and then stilled. You're never intruding. She turned. Her face was the most vulnerable Ash had ever seen it, no mask, no calculation, no defense. Just Jupiter, raw and real, wanting something so badly it was written across every line of her body. I'm not like Mars, she whispered. I don't know how to, I know. He took her hand. The same way he had on the platform, palm up, open, an invitation. She looked at their joined hands, and something in her eyes shimmered. Is this, she swallowed. Is this okay? With everything? With Mars, and Mars stepped forward. Put her hand on Jupiter's other arm. Jup. We've literally fought gods together. I think we can figure this out. Jupiter let out a breath, a sound that was equal parts laugh and relief and the release of a tension she'd been carrying for longer than she could remember. Her fingers tightened around Ash's. Her other hand came up and covered Mars's. They stood in the kitchen, three people holding onto each other, connected, imperfect, real. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. The moment held itself, suspended in the warm light and the smell of curry and the quiet tick of the kitchen clock, and it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Morning. Ash woke to the sound of arguing. Mars was in the kitchen, attempting breakfast. The stove was producing smoke. Purigly was on the counter, batting at a piece of toast. Pikachu was stealing berries from a bowl while Mars wasn't looking, which was always. The eggs are supposed to be runny, Mars was insisting. They are not supposed to be raw, Jupiter said from the kitchen table, where she sat with the newspaper and a cup of tea, her glasses perched on her nose, glasses she'd started wearing recently, admitting to the nearsightedness she'd hidden during her galactic days. There is a significant difference between a soft-boiled egg and salmonella. Oh, like you could do better, I could. Demonstrably. I have a 94% success rate with eggs. You measured your egg success rate? Who does that? Competent people. Mars threw a dish rag at Jupiter's head. Jupiter caught it without looking up from the paper. Saturn, emerging from his room with the bleary-eyed confusion of someone still adjusting to freedom, took one look at the scene and retreated back through his door. Ash stood in the hallway and watched. Pikachu climbed up to his shoulder and chittered happily, cheeks warm against Ash's neck. This was his life now. Former enemies cooking terrible eggs in his kitchen. A newspaper-reading strategist deflecting thrown dish rags. A rehabilitating ex-commander hiding from breakfast chaos. A Pikachu committing berry theft. Home. Mars caught him staring from the doorway and pointed a spatula at him. You're late. Sit down. Eat your salmonella eggs. They're not oh, fine. Ash sat. Jupiter slid the newspaper toward him, and their fingers brushed over the headlines, and the touch lingered for half a second longer than it needed to. Mars set a plate in front of him. The eggs were, in fact, questionable. He ate them anyway. You know, he said, I think the eggs are getting better. They're objectively worse than last week, Jupiter said. Shut up, Jup. I'm merely providing, shut up, Jup. Ash ate his eggs and drank his coffee and listened to the two most important people in his life argue about poultry preparation, and the morning sun came through the kitchen windows and laid warm bars of gold across the table, and it was good. It was so good. He thought about the boy who'd walked out of Pallet Town at age 10 with a reluctant Pikachu and a dream too big for his body. That boy would never have imagined this house, these people, this life. He'd imagined trophies and titles and the roar of crowds. He'd gotten something better. Mars leaned over his shoulder to steal a piece of toast from his plate, and her hair brushed his cheek, and she smelled like smoke and something floral she'd never admit to wearing, and his heart did the thing it kept doing around her, the skip, the surge, the quiet confirmation that this was real and chosen and his. Jupiter's foot pressed against his under the table. Light, deliberate, barely there. Her version of holding hands, subtle, precise, unmistakable in its intention. He pressed back. Her newspaper rustled as she hid a smile. Pikachu, having consumed approximately twice his body weight in berries, fell asleep on the table next to the pepper shaker. The morning went on. The mountain didn't shake. The sky didn't crack. The world turned in its ordinary way, held together by the same forces that had always held it, gravity, light, the stubborn insistence of living things to keep living. But deep below, in the sealed darkness beneath Spear Pillar, something stirred. Not much. A tremor. A vibration. The faintest pulse of unlight in a void that should have been empty. The cracks were sealed. The conduit was closed. The lake guardians slept, content. But sealed was not the same as healed. Closed was not the same as gone. And in the space between realities, in the nothing that underlaid everything, the entity that Jupiter had called Erebus pressed against the scars with infinite patience. It had touched the world. Briefly. Partially. Through the cracks that a madman had made. And from that touch, it had learned something new. Something it had never needed before, in its timeless, thoughtless existence. It had learned to want. The scars would hold. For now. For years, maybe. The world was strong, and its guardians were vigilant, and in a house in Hearthome City, a boy and his Pokemon and two women who had chosen love over oblivion would be ready. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. And that was enough. For now, that was enough. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.